13 years before the proclamation of the Empire, Alex awoke to the sound of falling dishes and his father's sleepy grumbling. The melodic sound of shattering ceramics cut through the morning silence of their modest home, like the ringing of bells, signaling the start of a new day. Through the thin walls of their apartment on level 43, high enough to avoid the industrial fumes of the lower levels, but not high enough to enjoy the clean air of the elite floors, came the familiar morning muttering of the kitchen droid K7PO and the irritated sighs of his mother. The air in the room was permeated with the subtle scent of synthetic cough, which K7PO had been trying unsuccessfully to brew for days. Outside the window, speeders darted like giant metallic dragonflies, their engines emitting a drawn-out hum that blended into a single symphony of the awakening Corellian metropolis.
"That iron idiot screwed something up again," came the tired voice of Kieran Corin, a second-class technician at the Corellian shipyards, his eyes gleaming with the distant stars he'd helped conquer, building ships for the Republic fleet. "Lyra, let's get a proper droid already. This one's been around for ages. He's completely lost his mind." The boy stretched under the thin, temperature-regulating blanket, yawned, inhaling the morning air, and suddenly frowned. Something in his father's words struck him as odd, like a dissonance in a familiar melody. "The droid's gone nuts. But why? Droids are smart, aren't they? They should know what they're doing. How could a machine capable of speech, humor, and even showing anything resembling concern simply go nuts?" "Alex, breakfast!" his mother called, her voice carrying that special note of morning haste familiar to every resident of the working-class neighborhood. He rose from his bed, feeling the cool metal floor beneath his bare feet, pulled on some soft synthetic loungewear, and wandered into the kitchen, passing a narrow hallway whose walls were decorated with holographic images of his family and views of distant worlds they would never visit. K7PO stood at the stove, his chrome frame gleaming in the rays of Corellia's morning sun streaming through the wide window. The golden light played off the polished metal, creating whimsical reflections that danced across the kitchen walls. The droid held a frying pan in his graceful arms, from which billowed a suspicious blue-gray smoke that smelled of burnt plastoid and something vaguely chemical. Outside the window, the drawn-out hum of a passing cargo speeder echoed, probably one of those delivering parts to the shipyards where my father worked. The sound gradually faded, dissolving into the general hum of the waking city, where millions of beings began their day in the endless dance of civilization. "Good morning, little Master Alex," the droid said in its melodic, mechanical voice, which seemed to harbor a note of genuine regret. "I'm afraid I'm having a little trouble preparing breakfast. My cooking programs seem to need updating." Kieran, a middle-aged man with tired brown eyes, shook his head, the gray hairs in his dark locks glistening in the morning light. His face bore the distinctive weariness of a man who battles technology every day. "Updates. As if we know where to get them. At the service center they say, 'Buy a new model, this one's outdated. And a new one costs half my annual salary.'" Lyra Corin, a slender woman with short brown hair and intelligent green eyes, worked as a cargo dispatcher at the spaceport. Her hands, unlike her husband's, were clean, but her fingers bore the marks of constant use of holopanels, barely noticeable scuffs from the touchscreens. She turned on the holoprojector, and a flickering 3D image of a news anchor appeared above the kitchen table, an elegant man in an expensive suit, speaking with the haughty calm characteristic of the upper levels. "Another navigation system failure has delayed flights in the Alderaan sector," the hologram reporter reported, his words accompanied by images of star charts and flashing red dots indicating problem areas. "Republic naval engineers are working to resolve the issue, but a restoration timeline has not yet been determined. Senator Palpatine expressed concern over the increasing frequency of technical failures and called for increased monitoring of life support systems." "The navigation's glitching again," Lyra sighed, sipping from her cup of hot tea, the aroma of which mingled with the smells of the morning kitchen. "It's good we're living on a planet and not floating around in space." Another speeder rustled past the window, its anti-gravity engines emitting a distinctive high-frequency whistle that mid-level residents had learned to ignore, like the heartbeat of their hometown. Alex sat down at the table, upholstered in a soft synthetic material that mimicked the leather of a Corellian Nerf, and looked at the droid, who was still trying to cook something. A simple yet piercing question arose in his childish mind. Why can't a droid detect its own malfunctions? If it understands that the programs aren't working, then it can check them. New news came from the holoprojector. Trade talks with the Trade Federation continue, despite growing tensions.
Federation representatives are insisting on lower taxes on trade routes in the Outer Ring.
"Dad," he said, interrupting the flow of news, "why can't K7PO fix himself?" Kieran laughed, the short, tired laugh of a man who knows too much about the vagaries of technology. "Droids aren't people, son. They only do what they're programmed to do. If the programming breaks, they need repairs." "And who programs them?" "Well," Father mused, rubbing his chin with a hand that smelled of metal and machine oil. "The manufacturer, probably. Or specialized programmers. I don't know, honestly." Alex frowned, feeling something important forming in his mind. "But someone writes programs, right? Ordinary people?" K7PO finally approached the table, his servos whirring softly with each movement, carrying a plate of what looked vaguely like scrambled eggs, but had a suspiciously bluish tint and an aroma that was anything but appetizing.
"Breakfast is ready," he announced with that mechanical politeness that seemed to conceal something more.
"However, I cannot guarantee that it fully complies with the nutritional standards of organic beings." Lyra tried the edge of the bluish mass with her fork and grimaced, as if she had tasted something extremely unpleasant. "It's kind of salty. And why is it blue?" "Perhaps there was an error in the color settings of my sensors," the droid replied calmly, but his voice held a note of what would be called confusion in a living being. "Or in the dosage of the nutritional supplements." A new sound came from outside the window, the low hum of a security patrol speeder, its siren blaring its distinctive two-tone signals, echoing off the walls of the neighboring buildings. "Can you check your settings?" Alex asked, his childish voice ringing out in the morning kitchen like a challenge to the very foundations of their world.
The droid turned its head toward him, its optical sensors focusing on the boy's face. Something akin to surprise flickered in their depths, an emotion that, according to all textbooks, droids shouldn't have. This is not part of my basic functions, little master." The news continued to pour from the holoprojector. The Jedi continue to investigate the incident on Naboo. Jedi Master Qui-Gon Jinn refused to comment on rumors of the return of the Sith. "But that's stupid," Alex suddenly said, his voice laced with that childish directness that can sometimes cut through complex adult problems like a lightsaber. "If a droid's broken, you need to fix it. And to fix it, you need to figure out what's broken." The parents exchanged that special look that adults exchange when a child asks questions that are too difficult. "Son, it's not that simple," the mother said softly, her voice carrying the tenderness with which adults try to shield children from the complexity of the world.
"Why not just?"
Alex asked in genuine surprise, and his surprise was so pure that even K7PO turned his head in his direction.
"Why indeed?" The question hung in the kitchen air, mingling with the aromas of a failed breakfast and the sounds of the waking city. "Children always ask stupid questions," Lyra smiled, stroking her son's soft, dark hair. "I remember when I was his age, I asked my mother why the stars didn't fall to the ground." "That's a good question," Alex said with that seriousness that sometimes creeps into children's voices. "Why don't they fall?" "Because they're far away," Kieran replied, sipping from a cup of what K7PO called coffee. "And anyway, they're not stars. They're the suns of other planets." "So why don't they fall?" The parents exchanged glances again. Kieran scratched the back of his head, leaving barely noticeable traces of machine oil in his hair.
Well, there's complex physics there. Gravitational fields, orbits. They teach that in school. Alex thought, but if Dad knows, why can't he explain it? It's strange. Adults always say something is complicated instead of simply explaining it, as if complexity is a wall, not a ladder. Meanwhile, K7PO attempted to make coffee. His movements were precise, almost graceful, but the coffee machine leaked a suspiciously brown liquid with a metallic taste, smelling more like industrial solvent than the refined beverage. "The coffee is ready," the droid announced with the same mechanical politeness, although my analyzers show some deviations from the standard recipe. Kieran tried it and winced, as if he had swallowed something extremely unpleasant. "This is not coffee. This is shit." "Perhaps there was a mix-up in the tanks," K7PO suggested, a note of guilt creeping into his voice. "I'll run a diagnostic." Although no, the diagnostic programs aren't accessible to my level of clearance. A heavy cargo speeder rumbled past the window, likely carrying parts for the ships under construction. The sound of its engines was deep and bassy, causing the windows to shake slightly. "Who can launch them?" Alex asked, his question sounding like a key turning in a secret lock. "A certified technician," the droid replied, a hint of life in his voice again. "Or a user with administrative rights." "How do I get administrative rights?" The droid paused again, its optical sensors blinking several times. "That's a difficult question, little master." Alex noticed that K7PO clearly knew more than he was saying. There was something alive in his demeanor. He wasn't simply following commands. He was thinking, choosing his words, even getting upset when something didn't work. It was as if something like a heart was beating behind his chrome frame. New reports came from the holoprojector. Tabana gas prices continue to rise, causing concern among spacecraft manufacturers. Economists warn of a possible crisis in the transportation industry. "Dad, why are all the droids so smart but pretend to be stupid?" Kieran laughed, but there was a note of uncertainty in his laughter. "Droids don't pretend, son. They're just machines. Very complex ones, but machines nonetheless." "But K7PO understands humor, and he gets upset when things don't work out." "It's an imitation," Lyra explained, but her voice still held the same uncertainty. "The program makes them look human so we can communicate with them more easily." Alex looked at the droid. K7PO stood motionless, but there was a tenseness in his posture, as if he were listening to someone talking about himself and taking offense. His chrome fingers flexed slightly, barely noticeable, but Alex could see it. "K7PO, do you understand what we're saying?" "Of course, little master. I process speech signals and generate appropriate responses." "Do you feel anything?" The droid froze. Its photocells flickered several times, as if it were processing not just information, but something far more complex. "I perform my functions to the best of my ability," he finally answered. But that wasn't the answer, and Alex realized it. Silence hung in the air, broken only by the hum of the city outside and the quiet hum of the holoprojector. An air taxi floated past the window, its repulsor lifts humming softly, creating the modern melody that the entire Corellian metropolis dwelt to. Alex watched it go and thought, why doesn't anyone ask how they fly? It's so interesting. "Mom, who invented repulsor lifts?" "I don't know, dear. They've always been there." "But someone must have invented them sometime." "Probably," Lyra shrugged. "Some ancient engineers? It was a long time ago." "Where can I find information about how they work?" The parents exchanged that look that meant their son was asking awkward questions again. Kieran frowned. "Why do you need this, son? Are you planning on becoming an engineer?" "Why not?" "Well, I don't mind. The main thing in this job is to strictly follow the rules. Remember Uncle Garrick?
He was trying to figure out how hyperdrives worked. He nearly blew up half the shipyard, which got him kicked out of everything. Now he's hanging around the outer rim selling spare parts. But he understood something? I realized it's better not to meddle in things you don't understand. Kieran chuckled with the bitterness of a man who once dreamed of more. Modern technology is too complex for human understanding. We can only use it. Alex frowned. Strange logic. If something is complex, it needs to be studied and understood. As simple as 2 + 2 = 4. Why do adults think the other way around?
The latest news came from the holoprojector. The senator called for a peaceful resolution of trade disputes. In his speech, he emphasized the importance of diplomacy in resolving intergalactic conflicts. "Alex, it's time for you to get ready for school," said the mother, looking at the chronometer on the wall. He nodded and went to his room, smelling the morning air filled with the sense of a waking city. Ozone from the engines, metallic dust, the aroma of synthetic food from the neighboring apartments. K7PO watched him go. Alex stopped at the door and turned around. "K7PO, would you like to understand how you are made?" The droid froze. Its photocells dimmed, then flickered back on, as if it were going through an internal struggle. "I don't understand the question, little master." But there was something very real in his voice, something like longing, a desire, a dream of freedom he'd never had. Or so it seemed to Alex. Alex went to get dressed, but his thoughts were troubling him. A beautiful, technologically advanced world stretched out beyond the window. Glittering skyscraper spires, graceful overhead bridges gliding with speeders, holographic advertisements promising a better life, smart droids pretending to be simple machines, adults using complex things without wanting to understand how they work. Why does no one want to know the truth? The boy thought as he pulled on his school uniform. This question haunted him. It was as if something had clicked in his head, and for the first time he truly began to think about the world around him. And the more he thought, the more questions arose, as if each answer gave rise to 10 new riddles, all of which added up to one great mystery. The mystery of a world that prefers not to know itself. Chapter 2. Dad's Work. On Saturday, my father suddenly suggested, "Do you want to come to work with me? I'll show you what Dad does." Alex was delighted. Perhaps he'd find answers to his questions at the shipyard? The Corellia shipyards were renowned throughout the galaxy for building the finest cargo ships and fast courier vessels. The morning air of Corona was filled with the scent of the blooming jasmine bushes that grew in the gardens of their residential area. A light breeze carried the faint whistle of the numerous speeders already zipping along the airways. Somewhere in the distance, industrial complexes hummed monotonously, awakening for a new workday. They boarded the family airspeeder, an old but reliable Socorro 340. Kieran ran his hand over the security scanner, and the aircraft responded with a soft blue glow from the instrument panel. The cabin filled with the quiet hum of systems awakening from slumber. The autopilot engaged, and the aircraft rose smoothly above the residential area, joining the leisurely morning traffic.
"Dad, how does the autopilot work?" Alex asked, looking at the instrument panel, where dozens of indicators flickered like stars in a miniature constellation. "The computer analyzes air currents, monitors other cars, and chooses the optimal route," my father replied, leaning back in his chair and watching the city slowly float by beneath them. "Everything is automatic." Below, neat middle-class neighborhoods stretched out, with their manicured gardens and gleaming rooftops. Land speeders darted between the buildings, leaving barely noticeable trails of exhaust. The air vibrated with the multitude of engines, a symphony of modern civilization. "How does the computer do this?" Kieran thought, listening to the measured hum of the repulsor engines. "Well, it has sensors, processors. It's a complicated thing. The main thing is that it works." Snippets of the morning news came from the speeder's speakers.
Corel Shipbuilding Corporation shares rose 3 points after signing a contract with the Trade Federation for 200 consular-class freighters. Analysts predict further growth in the interplanetary transportation sector. The announcer's voice was cheerful and optimistic, as befits an era of prosperity. What if it breaks? We'll take it to a service center. They'll replace the faulty unit, my father replied, changing the channel. A light melody was playing now. Something about the silver stars of Alderaan and Dancing in the Moonlight. A popular song that was playing on all the entertainment channels. What's inside the block? I don't know, son, and you don't need to know. The main thing is that the part number is correct. Alex frowned. Strange. If Dad's a ship mechanic, why doesn't he know how the things he works with work? The Corellian shipyards were a vast complex of hangars, workshops, and slipways, stretching for miles along the coast. Ships of all sizes were moored everywhere, from sleek courier vessels with their streamlined hulls to massive freighters resembling flying fortresses. The monotonous roar of industrial machinery merged into a single symphony of creation. Somewhere, automatic cranes creaked, moving multi-ton sections of housing. Pneumatic systems hissed, hammers clanged, conveyors hummed, carrying an endless stream of parts and components. The air trembled with the vibration of powerful engines undergoing testing. At the entrance to the administrative area, they were stopped by a security guard in a corporate security uniform, an elderly man with a military bearing and watchful eyes. "Good morning, Master Kieran," he greeted his father. "Please proceed to the scanner." Kieran placed his ID card on the reader, which emitted a melodic beep. He then passed through the biometric scanner archway. The device enveloped him in invisible beams, checking dozens of parameters in a split second. "What about the boy?" the security guard asked. "Son, I'm showing him the production," Kieran explained. "Understood. Then a temporary pass." The guard activated a small badge and handed it to Alex. "Wear it where you can see it, son. And don't go anywhere without an adult escort." Workers in blue overalls scurried between the ships carrying tools and spare parts. Their faces were focused, their movements precise and practiced. Many carried data pads, constantly consulting technical schematics and parts lists. "Impressive?" Kieran smiled, watching his son's expression. "Yes! What are you doing here?" "I'm a maintenance technician. When a ship breaks down, I determine which parts need replacing." They passed an area where automated lines assembled navigation system components. Robotic arms moved with mesmerizing precision, installing microchips and connecting wires. The air here was sterile. Filtration systems removed even the smallest dust particles that could disrupt the sensitive electronics. They entered one of the hangars. Parked there was a YR-900 medium-duty freighter, a popular model Alex had seen advertised. But this one looked battered. Its hull was covered in traces of cosmic dust and micrometeorites, and a patch was visible on one of the fenders, the result of an emergency repair somewhere in the depths of the galaxy. "What's wrong with him?" the boy asked. "The navigation system is malfunctioning," my father explained, running his hand over the worn hull. "The ship can't correctly calculate the jump to hyperspace." A man in overalls approached them, tall, with graying hair and cunning eyes. "Oh, Kieran's brought the air," he chuckled, wiping his hands with a rag. "Hello, kid. I'm Nilsson, the senior technician of this madhouse." Somewhere deep in the hangar, a powerful engine roared to life, filling the space with a low, vibrating hum. Automatic ventilation systems immediately kicked into action, forcing air through filters. "Hi," Alex greeted. "Dad told me my Uncle Garrick used to work here and screwed up the hyperdrive. Did you know him?" Nilsson's face darkened, and the noise of welding machines operating nearby could be heard. "Your uncle? Yes, I remember. He was a good technician, but too curious." The public address system loudspeakers announced, "Attention, Sector 3 personnel. Engine testing on stand number 7 will begin in 10 minutes. Observe safety precautions." What happened? He decided one day to figure out how a Class 2 hyperdrive worked. Nilsson said, sitting down on a box of spare parts that smelled faintly of preservative. I was still an intern then. So he said, "There it is, right in front of me. Why don't I take it apart and see?" Kieran shook his head, listening to the rhythmic sound of automatic hammers in the neighboring workshop. And what did you see? Some crystals, metal gratings, wires, nothing clear. Garrick tried to remove one part. It suddenly started glowing. They barely managed to escape. Well, the automatics kicked in, an investigation ensued, and he was thrown out. At that moment, business news came over the loudspeakers. Techno Union Corporation announced the development of a new line of droids for industrial production. Automation is expected to reduce production costs by 15%. The announcer's voice cut off, giving way to an advertising jingle. Corsec Banking, your loans guaranteed by future profits. What does the technical documentation say? Alex asked. The documentation says, do not disassemble. If faulty, replace the entire unit. Nilsson chuckled, shouting over the noise of the working mechanisms. Very informative. Who makes these engines? The Corellian Engineering Corporation, but they don't know how they work either. How come they don't know? Alex asked in surprise. Well, that's it. They have factories that churn out engines using ancient templates, but the factory documentation was lost long ago. The templates work, and that's fine. Why change anything? The air filled with the whistle of pneumatic tools. Somewhere nearby, technicians were installing a new turbine, and the sound of the compressors mingled with the quiet conversations of the workers. Kieran approached the ship's navigation console and activated the diagnostic program. The screen glowed with a cold, bluish light, and lines of text appeared, most of them glowing an alarming red. The console emitted a barely audible hum, the sound of processors analyzing the system's status. Look, son, the system shows which units are faulty. All I have to do is order replacements. What do these error codes mean? It doesn't matter. The main thing is the part number. Alex looked at the screen. Messages flashed by. Sync error, connection timeout, incorrect parameters. Some of the words were clear even to him. The air was filled with the faint scent of heated electronic components, the distinctive aroma of computers in operation. Dad, what is connection timeout? Don't worry about it, son. It's technical terminology. But you're a technician. I'm a parts technician, Kieran chuckled, his voice almost drowned out by the rumble of a passing forklift. Real design engineers were around a long time ago when this technology was invented. Alex frowned. Connection timeout sounded like something couldn't connect. Maybe the problem wasn't with the unit, but that it couldn't communicate with something? Can I check the antenna? Why? Nilsson asked, looking up from his datapad where he was reviewing parts orders. The diagnostics show a faulty navigation unit. But if the antenna doesn't work, the navigation unit will also show errors. The technicians exchanged glances. Chiron scratched his head, and at that moment, an entertaining tune began playing over the speakers. Under the twin suns of Tatooine, where the sands sing of love. A popular song sung throughout the inner sphere. Sounds logical, but the instructions say if there is a navigation error, replace the navigation unit. What if the instructions are wrong? Instructions are never wrong, Nilsson said, his voice mingling with the monotonous hum of the cooling fans. They were written by corporate specialists. But can't specialists make mistakes? They can, but we are not experts to fix them. Alex looked at his father and Nilsson. They were smart men, experienced technicians, but for some reason, they were afraid to think for themselves, as if someone had forbidden them to understand the equipment they serviced. The air was filled with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee. Someone among the workers was taking a break. Mixed with the smells of metal and grease, it created a unique atmosphere of everyday work. Dad, where can I find old schematics? The ones that explain how everything works. Why do you need this, son? Just curious. Nilsson thought, listening to the rhythmic clatter of the stamping presses in the neighboring workshop. There are old drawings in the archive, but they're useless. They're nothing but formulas and calculations that no one understands. Can I see it? Sure, Nilsson shrugged. Just don't touch anything. They walked to the far corner of the hangar, where massive cabinets filled with datapad chips stood. It was quieter here. The thick walls muffled the industrial noise. It smelled of dust and old plastic, the odors of an archival storage facility. Nilsson opened one of the cabinets, and a cool, climate-controlled breeze wafted in. Here, look. Documentation for a Class 5 hyperdrive. An ancient model, out of production for 100 years. Alex took the chip and inserted it into the datapad. The device hummed softly as it processed the information. Complex diagrams, formulas, and charts appeared on the screen. Millions of data files. "There's so much information here," he exclaimed. "It describes how every single part works." "Yes, but who's going to understand that?" Nilsson chuckled. "There's about a petabyte of data here." A petabyte? Alex wasn't sure if that was a lot or a little, but it sounded impressive. "A lot," Nilsson explained. Alex leafed through the files. Formulas, graphs, calculations. It all looked complicated, but not impossible. He'd been taught math and physics at school. Maybe, if he tried really hard. The loudspeakers blared the news. "The Senate of the Republic has approved a bill to expand trade routes in the Middle Ring. 50 million new jobs are expected to be created in the transportation industry." "And who wrote these diagrams?" "Ancient engineers," Chiron replied, watching his son delve into the files. "Those whose names we don't even know." In one of the files, Alex noticed the signature. Design Engineer Django West. But the date had been erased by time. But how do we create new models if no one understands the principles? "Computers," Nilsson explained in one word. Why should a person bother with their brains if a machine can do everything faster and more accurately? At that moment, somewhere deep in the shipyard, a test rig began to operate. The powerful roar of engines filled the air, causing the hangar walls to vibrate slightly. But if a person doesn't understand, how can he improve anything? "Why improve it?" Chiron asked, surprised. "It already works." Alex looked at the schematics again. So, in all these years, no one has tried to understand or improve the technology? Are the new ships better than the old ones? Not particularly, Nilsson admitted, shouting over the noise of the machinery. Maybe a little more reliable, but fundamentally nothing has changed. So many years and no changes? Why change anything? Chiron shrugged. The ships are flying, the hyperdrives are working, the people are happy. Alex carefully put the chip back. It was a strange picture. People were using complex things without understanding them or trying to improve them. They returned to the ship. Chiron ordered a new navigation unit through the supply terminal. The device responded with a melodic confirmation signal. The unit was supposed to arrive in a few days. Standard procedure. If it breaks, they replace it. "Dad, what will happen to the old block?" "They'll send it for processing. They'll extract the valuable materials there." "Can't it be fixed?" "No, it's not economically feasible. It's easier to buy a new one." Alex thought about it. Why doesn't anyone try to find and fix the problem? They just throw it away and buy a new one. "Dad, can I borrow an old unit just to see what's inside?" Chiron and Nilsson exchanged glances. "Why do you need this, son?" "Just curious. I won't break anything. I'll just have a look." "Okay," the father agreed. "But just to have a look, and no experiments." Nilsson brought a small lighting control unit, a simple component, unlikely to be dangerous. It emitted a faint smell of plastic and metal. "Here, take it." Alex picked up the unit and examined it closely. The casing was sealed, with no screws or connectors. It was as if it had been deliberately designed to be inseparable. "Why is it sealed?" "To keep users out," Chiron explained. For security.
But how to fix it then?
Nothing. If it breaks, throw it away and buy a new one.
Alex turned the unit over in his hands. If something inside was broken, why couldn't it be fixed? Someone assembled it, right?
It's time to go home, said Kieran. Mom will worry.
The speeder glided smoothly along the air route, overtaking slower vehicles. A calm melody flowed from the speakers, something about starry dreams and galactic expanses. Alex was silent, processing what he'd seen. Technicians who didn't understand the devices they serviced, schematics no one had read, technologies no one had tried to improve. Dad, have people always known so little about technology?
I don't know, son. Maybe they knew more back then. But why bother when you have computers? Technology is so complex that you could study it your whole life and never even come close to understanding automated algorithms. There's no point in competing with computers.
What if the computers break? Kieran thought as he watched the city lights begin to come on in the gathering darkness.
Then it will be bad. But they don't break. They are too reliable. Alex looked out the window at flying cars, spaceships, and glittering city towers. A beautiful, developed world, filled with the sounds of civilization and the sense of prosperity. But why didn't anyone want to understand how it works? At home, Alex went straight to his room and placed the sealed block on the table. The adults said it was dangerous. But how can you understand the world if you don't study anything? Maybe tomorrow he'll try to open it. Very carefully. Chapter 3. School Questions. On Monday, Alex came to school with new questions. His weekend at the shipyard had made him look at the world around him differently. High technology was everywhere, but no one understood how it worked. The morning commute to school led through the heart of the corporate district. Alex walked along wide avenues paved with synthetic stone that shimmered like precious gems in the rising sun. Airspeeders streaked overhead, their engines emitting a melodic hum that blended into a symphony of technological progress. Holographic billboards flickered between buildings, showcasing the latest corporate achievements: new droid models, advanced communicators, climate control systems. All this technological splendor surrounded the city's inhabitants from birth, becoming a natural backdrop to their existence. The pedestrian walkways were equipped with moving belts, smoothly carrying adults hurrying to work and children heading to school. Alex preferred to walk, observing the world around him. He noticed details that others overlooked: the sparking of contacts at the joints of moving belts, the way holograms flickered in the air from interference of unknown origin, the occasional stutter of information droids repeating the same phrase. The Corellian Engineering Corporate School was housed in a modern building on the 22nd floor. A tower of black metal and translucent ceramic rose skyward, like a monolithic monument to human achievement. The building's facade was adorned with bas-reliefs, depicting momentous moments in technological history: the first spaceflight, the creation of the hyperdrive, and the founding of the Galactic Republic. Streams of light flowed between the bas-reliefs, creating the illusion of movement and life within the frozen metal. The main entrance was a wide arch framed by polished durasteel columns. Above it glowed the corporation's holographic emblem, a stylized star surrounded by planetary orbits. Automatic doors silently opened for each person entering, scanning biometric data and admitting only authorized individuals. An atmosphere of understated luxury permeated the school's interior. Polished marble floors reflected the light from recessed ceiling fixtures, creating a play of light and shadow. The walls were paneled with rare woods imported from distant worlds, and between them were interactive information panels displaying class schedules, corporate news, and educational materials. The building's air was perfectly conditioned, cool and fresh from the purifying systems. The ventilation system operated silently, with only the occasional soft hiss of air passing through the filters. The building's acoustics were meticulously designed. Footsteps were absorbed by special coatings, and voices were echo-free thanks to sound-absorbing panels. Classrooms were equipped with state-of-the-art holoprojectors, capable of creating three-dimensional images with stunning detail. Interactive whiteboards responded to the slightest touch, allowing teachers and students to manipulate information with gestures. EDU-7 educational droids stood in the corners of the classrooms, their metal bodies polished to a mirror shine, their optical sensors constantly scanning the room, ready to provide additional information on any question. Each student's workstation was equipped with a personal data pad, a thin, transparent sheet of material on whose surface text, images, and interactive elements appeared. When using the data pads, a distinctive sound played in the classroom, the soft tapping of fingers on the touch-sensitive surfaces, creating a rhythmic melody of collective learning. Occasionally, this sound was interrupted by a soft beep of notifications or a quiet hum as the devices synchronized with the central system. Everything seemed very progressive, but Alex was beginning to notice oddities. The neural interfaces for learning, the thin silver metal headbands that students wore during certain classes, allowed information to be downloaded directly into their memory. However, this information was superficial. Names, definitions, facts, but no understanding of principles. Alex felt knowledge settling in his mind like dust, not connecting, not forming a coherent picture of the world. The first lesson was Technology Fundamentals, a course designed to explain to the children how the devices around them worked. Alex eagerly awaited this lesson, hoping to finally get answers to the questions that had been plaguing him since the weekend. Mrs. Vore, a middle-aged teacher with a neat, ripe wheat-colored hairstyle and stern gray eyes, entered the classroom with the dignity of an experienced educator. Her dark blue suit was impeccably pressed, and a small brooch in the shape of the corporation's emblem glittered on her lapel. She activated the holoprojector with a flick of her wrist, and the device responded with a soft hum that gradually increased in volume until a detailed cross-section of an airspeeder appeared above the classroom. The hologram slowly rotated, revealing the vehicle's internal structure. Individual components were illuminated in different colors: the propulsion system in blue, the control system in green, and the casing in gold. The image was so realistic that it seemed as if a real speeder was hovering before the students, allowing them to peer into its mechanical interior. "Today, we're studying the principles of flight," she announced in a voice honed by years of teaching. "Who can tell me why machines fly?" Several hands went up. Alex noticed his classmates raising their hands with varying degrees of confidence, some decisively, others hesitantly, as if hoping they wouldn't be questioned. Mrs. Wurr pointed to a girl in the front row, Lima, an excellent student with chestnut braids and a perpetually clean uniform. "Lima?" "Because they have repulsors," the girl answered proudly, clearly pleased at the opportunity to demonstrate her knowledge. "Correct. And what are repulsors?" Lima thought for a moment, her brows furrowing slightly. "These are devices that repel gravity?" "Absolutely right. Repulsor lifts create an anti-gravity field that allows machines to fly." Alex felt his disappointment growing. The explanation sounded familiar, but it didn't really make sense. He raised his hand and Mrs. Wurr nodded. "Mrs. Wurr, what is an anti-gravity field?" The teacher smiled the condescending smile of an adult explaining obvious things to a child. "It's a field that counteracts gravity, Alex." "How does it work?" "Well, it pushes the object away from the source of gravity." "And how?" Alex's voice rang with genuine curiosity, but Mrs. Wurr took it as a challenge to her competence. Her smile tightened. "It's very complex physics, Alex. It's enough to know that an anti-gravity field counteracts gravity." "But you're explaining the same thing in different words," Alex said, not wanting to seem impudent but unable to hide his disappointment. A few students chuckled in the classroom, taking his words as an attempt to embarrass the teacher. Mrs. Wurr flushed, and a hint of irritation entered her voice. "Alex, no need to be clever. The operating principle of repulsors is studied in technical institutes." "Do they know how they work?" "Of course they do. They train specialists there."
Alex recalled a conversation with his father and Uncle Nilsson. They were also specialists, working with technology every day, but they didn't understand how it worked. Did they really explain everything at the institutes, or did they also limit themselves to superficial definitions? Where can I read about how it works? Why does an 8-year-old need technical documentation? The teacher asked, as if the very idea struck her as absurd. Just curious. Interesting is good, but don't get ahead of yourself. Learn the basics first. What are the basics? What we study in class. Alex realized he was stuck in a vicious circle.
Basics are what they teach in school. But in school, they only teach names, without explaining how things actually work. It seemed the education system was justifying itself by failing to impart real knowledge. The lesson continued, accompanied by the quiet hum of the holoprojector and the occasional clicking sounds as Mrs. Vore cycled through the images. She explained the various types of engines: ion, plasma, and hyperdrives. The holograms alternated, showing cross-sections of the various mechanisms, but all the explanations boiled down to the following. Ion engines run on ions, plasma engines run on plasma, and hyperdrives allow you to travel faster than light. Alex listened, his frustration growing. Every explanation was a tautology, a definition of the concept in terms of itself. No one discussed how exactly ions create thrust, what plasma is at the physical level, or how the light barrier could be overcome. Mrs. Wurr, how is it possible to move faster than light?
Through hyperspace, Alex. What is hyperspace? This is another dimension where different laws of physics apply. And what laws? Those that allow you to move faster than light. The same thing all over again. Alex was beginning to realize that the teachers knew no more than the students. They simply memorized phrases and repeated them like mantras, without delving into the essence. Perhaps they themselves had once asked similar questions, but over time, they had come to terms with the lack of answers. After technology, there was math. Moving from class to class, the students walked along the hallways, their footsteps muffled by sound-absorbing surfaces. The walls were adorned with portraits of great scientists of the past, though Alex noticed they all lived a very long time ago, hundreds or thousands of years ago. There were no modern names among them. Alex hoped there would be more clarity in math.
Numbers don't lie. Formulas work the same for everyone. And there should be logic here, which was so lacking in technology class. The math teacher, Mr. Drake, was a young man in his 30s, with enthusiasm in his dark brown eyes. His red hair was slightly tousled, and he wore thin glasses that he adjusted periodically. Unlike the stern Mrs. Wurr, he genuinely loved his subject, and it was evident in his every movement. Today we're learning about multiplying 2-digit numbers, he announced, activating the interactive whiteboard. Numbers appeared on the surface, glowing with a soft blue light. Who remembers how to multiply 23 by 15? Several students raised their hands. Mr. Drake demonstrated the standard method of long multiplication, his fingers gliding effortlessly across the surface of the board, leaving glowing traces. Why do we need to learn that? Asked one of the students, a boy named Corin, known for his practical questions.
The datapad calculates faster.
Mathematics develops thinking, the teacher explained, and there was genuine conviction in his voice.
Could we study something more complex? Alex asked, hoping his curiosity would be met with understanding. What, for example? Well, how to solve equations? Mr. Drake was surprised, his eyebrows raised. They study that in high school. It's too early for you. Why is it early? Because first you need to master the basics. What if I've already mastered it? The teacher thought for a moment, adjusted his glasses, and decided to check. Okay, solve the problem. What is 127 multiplied by 394? Alex quickly calculated, visualizing the numbers in his mind and breaking them down into manageable parts. 50,038. Mr. Drake checked his datapad and his eyes widened in surprise. Right. How did you calculate so quickly? I represented 127 as 100 plus 27, and 394 as 400 minus 6, and calculated in parts. Where did you learn this?
I came up with it myself. Isn't it possible? We could, of course. Mr. Drake hesitated, clearly struggling with an internal conflict. But it's not in the program. Is it possible to study something that is not in the program? No, we must follow the training plan. And who compiled it? Ministry of Education. Do they know what's best for children? Mr. Drake hesitated, and Alex saw doubt in his eyes. Of course they know. There are specialists working there. Why did they decide that we don't need complex mathematics? Because complex calculations are done by computers. What if the computer breaks? Computers don't break. But what if? The teacher paused, and silence fell over the classroom. The other students followed the conversation with interest, as if they were hearing such questions for the first time. Then they will fix it. Who will fix them if no one understands how they work? Mr. Drake looked at Alex with concern, and something like fear flashed in his eyes. Alex, you ask very unusual questions for your age. After math, there was history. Moving on to the next class, Alex noticed how the other students' neural interfaces worked. The thin silver hoops flickered with faint lights as they downloaded information. Some children winced, as if uncomfortable, but no one complained. This was considered normal. Alex hoped to find out when modern technology appeared, how civilization developed, and who the geniuses were who created the world around them. Mrs. Rukia, an elderly teacher with gray hair pulled back into a stern bun and kind blue eyes behind thin glasses, spoke of the Galactic Republic. Her voice was soft, almost hypnotic, and she spoke with love of the subject to which she had dedicated her life. Our civilization has existed for thousands of years. During this time, we have achieved incredible heights in science and technology. When were repulsors invented? Alex asked, hoping for some concrete information. A very long time ago. The exact date is unknown. What about hyperdrives? A long time ago, too. These technologies appeared in ancient times. And who invented them? Ancient scientists. And their names? Some have survived, but that's not so important. Why doesn't it matter? Because achievements are important, not names. Alex felt a familiar disappointment. Even the story that was supposed to preserve the memory of the past turned out to be vague and unspecific. What new things have been invented in the last 100 years? Mrs. Rukia paused thoughtfully, and her pause lengthened. Well, we improved the existing technologies, made them more reliable. Something completely new? Fundamentally new things rarely appear. The main discoveries were made long ago. Why aren't they inventing anything now? Who said they don't invent? The teacher asked in surprise. Well, if there's nothing new in 100 years... Alex, you think too much about complicated things. You'd better focus on your studies. When the recess bell rang, Alex walked out into the hallway, where his classmates had already begun their games. But even here, he noticed something odd. The children were playing Star Wars, simulating battles between the Republic and mythical enemies, waving toy lightsabers. However, their ideas about war were highly romanticized and unrealistic. Another popular game was called Explorers. Children divided into teams and discovered new planets, but all their discoveries boiled down to listing already known facts. No one attempted to imagine what real exploration of the unknown would look like. The most common game was Technicians. Children pretended to repair various devices, but their actions were purely ritualistic. They pressed buttons, turned imaginary screws, but no one asked what exactly they were fixing or how it was supposed to work. After classes, Alex stayed in the school library. It was a spacious, high-ceilinged room where rows of physical books stood next to holographic data storage systems. The air smelled of old paper and the ozone from the operating information systems. Soft light fell through the large windows, creating a cozy atmosphere for reading and contemplation. He wanted to find books about how technology came to be, hoping that written sources would be more informative than school lessons. The librarian, an ED-209 droid, helped him find the section he needed. The machine moved silently, its sensors scanning the shelves at incredible speed. The droid's metal body was elegant, and its voice module was tuned to a pleasant, almost human timbre. But the books were disappointing. They all spoke in generalities about the great achievements of the ancients and gradual development. There were no specific dates, names of inventors, or explanations of operating principles. Page after page contained beautiful but empty phrases about the greatness of civilization, offering no real understanding of how it all began. ED-209, are there any books with details on how everything works? Such books are meant for specialists, the droid replied, his voice devoid of emotion. Children don't need them. Where can I find them? In technical libraries, but access is limited. Why? For safety. Unprepared people may misunderstand the information. And who decides who is prepared? The relevant authorities. Alex picked up a history book and began reading. It was strange. All the books only described the last 1,000 years. What happened before that? Was there really no civilization before the founding of the Republic? ED-209, are there any books about more ancient history? More ancient? About what happened before the Republic. Before the Republic, there was chaos. Civilization began with the founding of the Republic. And who founded it? Ancient sages who united the worlds. Where did they get the technology? They developed them. From what? From simpler technologies. And where are those from? The droid was silent for a few seconds, and Alex heard the quiet hum of its processors. Sorry, but I don't have any information to answer. Alex realized he'd stumbled upon something strange. The droid, whose database should have contained all available information, couldn't answer a simple question about the origins of the technology. ED-209, why don't you have this information? Perhaps it wasn't entered into my database. Why wasn't it included? Perhaps it is considered unimportant. And who decides what is important? Those who created my database. Is it possible to talk to them? No, it's impossible. Why? Because such an opportunity is not provided. Alex noticed the droid hesitated as he answered questions. There were slight delays in its speech patterns, as if the program was encountering limitations and trying to find workarounds. ED-209, can you answer any question? Not just any. Only those for which information is in the database. And if there is no information? Then I say I don't know. Don't you want to know the correct answer? The droid fell silent again, and this time the pause was especially long. I can't want. I'm following a program. That's a shame, Alex said sincerely. It would have been interesting. He closed the book and went home, reflecting on the strange day. The teachers didn't know the answers to simple questions. The droid couldn't tell the history of technology. Even the children's games reflected a superficial understanding of the world. It was as if someone had deliberately created a system that simulated education without imparting real knowledge. But why? And who could possibly be interested in people not understanding how their world works? The road home passed through the same streets, but now Alex looked at them with different eyes. Holographic advertising, flying cars, droids, all this technological splendor suddenly seemed like decoration, a beautiful shell concealing emptiness.
People used devices without understanding them, living in a world they couldn't explain. At home, Alex went straight to his room, where Uncle Nielsen's sealed data block lay on the table. The metal casing gleamed dully in the light of the desk lamp, guarding its secrets. Tomorrow he would try to open it, very carefully. Maybe there will be something understandable inside? Something real in this world of beautiful but empty explanations? Chapter 4. First Suspicions. At home, Alex went straight to his room, bypassing the living room where a holoprojector was broadcasting the evening news. The announcer's melodic voice carried through the thin walls. Chancellor Valorum ceremoniously opened a new medical center on Coruscant, cutting the symbolic ribbon with a ceremonial lightsaber. In his speech, the Chancellor emphasized the importance of developing medical technology for all worlds of the Republic. The parents were busy. The father was studying technical documentation for a new project, hunched over holographic blueprints that glowed with a bluish light above his desk. The mother was preparing dinner with the help of K7PO and the mouth-watering aromas of roasting Nerf meat and spicy spices from distant Kashyyyk wafted from the kitchen, mingling with the metallic tang of the air that inevitably permeated through the ventilation systems. It was the perfect time for exploration. Outside, Corellia's dusk was deepening, and the city's lights began to flare one after another, like stars descending from the heavens. Speeders whizzed past with the distinctive whistle of repulsor lifts, their headlights cutting glowing streaks through the evening air. Somewhere in the distance, the sirens of security patrol ships blared, and from the shipyards came the dull thud of hammers and the hiss of welders. The city never slept. Alex pulled the lighting control unit Uncle Nielsen had given him out of the closet. It was a small component, the size of a child's fist, its casing tightly sealed. No screws, connectors, or seams, just a smooth metal surface, pleasantly cool to the touch and vibrating slightly from the internal processes. But if you looked closely, you could see a thin line down the middle, barely visible in the light of the desk lamp. Alex took a thin screwdriver from his modeling kit and carefully pried up the edge, feeling the metal bend slightly under the pressure. The casing gave way with a soft click that sounded like a blaster shot in the silence of the room. What he found inside was completely different from what he expected. Instead of the usual wires and microchips, there were strange, transparent stones of varying sizes, from tiny ones, no bigger than a grain of rice, to large ones the size of a walnut. They glowed faintly from within with a bluish light, pulsating in time with some invisible heartbeat, and were connected by thin silver threads that shimmered with all the colors of the rainbow as they moved. "What is this?" Alex muttered, his voice echoing in the room like a whisper in an ancient temple. He gently touched one of the stones with his fingertip. The crystal warmed under his touch, like a living being, its glow intensified, turning from a soft blue to a bright white, and the entire block quietly hummed with a melodic sound, reminiscent of the singing of distant stars. The other crystals also glowed brighter, as if answering the call, and the silver threads sparkled with all the colors of the rainbow, creating a mesmerizing dance of light. New news came from the lounge. A scandal in Coruscant's high circles continues to roil the public. Senator Tarple's son, driving a speeder while intoxicated, crashed into the popular Stardust Cafe, causing over 100,000 credits in damage. There were no injuries, but the establishment's owners are demanding a fair investigation. Alex quickly removed his finger, but the unit continued to operate. In fact, it worked even better than it had when it was closed. The light became smoother and more pleasant, as if the very touch of a human had awakened something more than mere functionality in the ancient technology. "How is this possible?" the boy asked in surprise, inhaling the air, which now smelled vaguely sweet, like flowers from distant Naboo. He examined the crystals closer, holding the block up to his desk lamp. Something was moving within them. Tiny sparks of light that moved along complex trajectories, as if following ancient star charts. Each crystal was unique. Some pulsed with a steady light, others shimmered like beacons in the cosmic darkness.
and still others shimmered in every shade of blue and green. Alex noticed tiny symbols in one of the crystals. They were etched so finely that they were barely visible even under the magnifying glass from his modeling kit. The symbols looked very old, unlike the basic galactic language he knew, more like ancient script he'd seen in historical chronicles. Who made them? And when? The question echoed in his mind. A heavy cargo speeder rumbled past the window, likely carrying parts for the night shift at the shipyards. The sound of its engines was deep and bassy, causing the windows to vibrate slightly, and creating a sense of the power of an industrial civilization. Alex tried to carefully pull out one crystal, but the silver thread stretched like rubber and didn't break. But the other crystals began to glow differently. Their pulsation became more rapid, as if they were compensating for a disruption in the system, similar to how a living organism reacts to injury. They're connected, he realized, and the discovery made his heart beat faster. These aren't just parts, they're a system, a living system. The sizzling of oil in a frying pan and the melodic hum of K7PO's servos drifted from the kitchen. The aroma of cooking food mingled with the scent of the crystals, creating a wondrous bouquet of homey comfort and ancient mysteries. Alex carefully reassembled the block, feeling the crystals resist the separation from the air. It worked as if nothing had happened, but now the boy knew something wondrous was happening inside, something that connected him to secrets as old as the galaxy itself. He turned on the family computer, and the holographic screen glowed a soft blue, reflecting in his eyes. The system booted with the familiar melodic sound, and Alex tried to find information about crystal technology. He typed into a search engine, "How do crystals work in technology?" The results were disappointing. Advertisements for auto parts stores with bright holographic banners, general articles about revolutionary crystal processors without technical details, and numerous links to paid courses for specialists, the cost of which exceeded his father's annual salary. From the living room came the sounds of channel switching and a new announcer's voice. And now our traditional program, Wonders of the Galaxy. Today we'll travel to the mysterious planet Felucia, home to amazing creatures, sarlaccs, that can live for thousands of years. Alex tried another query. Ancient symbols on crystals. The search engine returned articles about jewelry from Iona, archaeological finds on Korriban, and advertisements for souvenir shops selling authentic antiquities at exorbitant prices. Nothing useful. It's strange, he muttered, breathing in the air that smelled of the distant spices from the kitchen. Why is there no normal information? He tried to find technical documentation, but all serious materials required special access or registration with professional associations, membership in which cost a fortune and required recommendations from current experts. K7PO, Alex called, his voice echoing off the walls of the room. The droid appeared in the doorway, its chrome body reflecting the light from the table lamp, creating strange reflections on the walls. Yes, little master? Can I ask you a question? Of course, the droid replied, and there was a note of genuine interest in his voice. What are you made of? Made of durasteel, plastoid, and crystalline components. What are crystalline components? These are elements that process information, K7PO replied, and Alex noticed the slightest pause. How do they do it? K7PO froze for a moment, just a little, but Alex noticed it the way one notices a change in a familiar melody. They use quantum effects to perform calculations, the droid replied. What are quantum effects? These are complex physical processes at the atomic level. A light speeder rustled outside the window, its engines emitting a high-pitched whistle that gradually faded into the evening air. Do you understand how they work? Another pause, more noticeable. I know the result of their work, but not the mechanism. Who knows the mechanism? The engineers who created my systems. And who are they? Specialists from the Sinar Fleet Systems Corporation. Do they themselves understand how crystals work?
K7PO paused longer than usual, his optical sensors flickering several times. I suppose so. Do you suppose so? I don't have precise information about the level of their knowledge. Alex frowned. The droid clearly knew more than he was letting on, or suspected something he didn't want to say. The tension in the air was almost palpable. From the living room came the sounds of a children's program. And the little Ewok Wicket set off on a journey across the forest bridges of Endor, where amazing adventures awaited him. The holographic sounds and music created a fairy tale atmosphere that contrasted with the seriousness of their conversation. K7PO, do you know what these symbols mean? Alex showed the droid a photo of the crystal he'd taken with his datapad. The image was clear, the symbols easily visible under magnification. The droid looked at the image and froze. It took too long for simple analysis. Its optical sensors focused, defocused, focused again. These are manufacturing markings, he finally answered, but there was a note of uncertainty in his voice. What do they mean? The batch number and... K7PO hesitated, as if his internal programs were fighting with each other. Technical information. What technical information? I can't say for sure. Perhaps it's the manufacturing parameters. Why are the symbols so ancient? Ancient? Well, they don't look like modern inscriptions. Perhaps it's a traditional marking system, the droid replied. Some standards haven't changed for centuries. But Alex noticed. K7PO clearly knew more than he was letting on. There was something cautious about his demeanor, as if he were balancing on the edge between his desire to help and some inner restraints. Outside the window, the lights of advertising holograms lit up, their multicolored rays penetrating the room, creating a whimsical play of light and shadow on the walls. K7PO, can you read these symbols? I can recognize some of them. What is written there? Technical codes. Nothing of interest to the average user. And for the unusual? The droid fell silent again, its servos whirring softly. Little Master, why do you need this information? Just curious. Curiosity is a good quality, but sometimes it can lead to trouble. What troubles? Those that are best avoided. At that moment, my father entered the room. He saw the disassembled block on the table and frowned. Alex, what is this? I'm studying how crystals work, Dad. Where did you get that? Kieran's voice became stern. A hint of alarm laced it. Uncle Nilsson gave it to the shipyard. And you took it apart? I just looked what's inside. Alex, Father came closer. I told you not to take anything apart. But I just wanted to understand how it works. Understanding is not your business. Your business is to study at school and not get involved in things you don't understand. But how will I understand if I don't study? Study what the program requires. Technology is for specialists. But why can't you just look? Kieran picked up the block and examined it, the crystals glowing faintly through the cracks in the casing. Because it's dangerous. See how it glows? What if it exploded? But it didn't explode. This time, and next time, it might explode. From the living room came the sounds of an evening action movie. The Jedi Kylon ignited his lightsaber, its blue blade cutting through the darkness of the dungeons of Korriban. The sounds of battle and dramatic music created the background for their conversation. Dad, why does all technology work on crystals? Because that's how the world works. And who invented them? Ancient engineers. Why does no one understand how they work now? Kieran looked at his son carefully. Something like concern flashed in his eyes. Who said they don't understand? Well, you don't understand. The teachers don't understand. We understand enough to use them. More is not needed. What if they break? We'll replace them with new ones. And if there are no new ones? There will be. Factories produce them. What if the factories break down? Father frowned, the wrinkles on his forehead deepening. Alex, you ask too many strange questions. Why strange? Because you're worried about something that will never happen. Our civilization has existed for thousands of years. Nothing will break. Did Uncle Garrick think so too? Kieran's face darkened as if clouds had blocked out the sun. Uncle Garrick thought he was smarter than everyone. And where is he now?
Hanging around the outer rim on cargo ships.
But he understood something?
I've realized it's better not to poke your nose into other people's business, and I advise you to do the same.
His father took the power supply and left the room, his heavy footsteps echoing down the hallway. Alex was left alone with K7PO, the air in the room filled with silence. Is he right? The boy asked. Is it really better not to study? It depends on what's more important, the droid replied after a long pause. Safety or knowledge? What is more important?
I can't answer that question. Everyone has to decide for themselves.
What would you choose? K7PO was silent for a long time, his optical sensors glowing dimly in the semi-darkness.
I would choose knowledge, but I'm just a droid.
Just that?
Yes, I don't have to worry about the consequences.
Do people need it?
People need to think about family, work, the future. Knowledge can ruin all of that.
And ignorance can't?
Maybe, but in a different way. Alex thought for a moment. So both knowledge and ignorance were dangerous. But why choose?
Outside, the city was alive. Speeders whizzed along the airways. Holographic advertisements flashed colorful lights, and music from the upper-level nightclubs played somewhere. K7PO, what will happen if I continue studying?
I don't know.
Perhaps nothing. Perhaps you'll learn something important. Is it possible? You might get into trouble. What troubles?
The same ones as your Uncle Garrick.
Is it worth the risk?
You must decide this for yourself.
Alex looked out the window. A technologically advanced city sparkled behind the glass. Cars flew, computers worked, droids scurried about. The entire world was built on technologies no one understood. And everyone was happy about it. Except him. At that moment, the mother's voice came from the kitchen.
Alex, it's time for dinner. I'm coming, he shouted, and turned to the droid. Shall we continue tomorrow?
If you want. I'll want to. Alex went to the kitchen, his thoughts preoccupied with his conversation with K7PO. The air in the hallway smelled of home, the aroma of cooked food, the faint scent of cleaning products, and the subtle metallic tang of city air. Over dinner, the parents discussed work. His father complained about another breakdown at the shipyard. Some critical crystal component had failed, and no one knew how to fix it. His mother talked about glitches in the cargo transportation system. The navigation computers had started to malfunction, and shipments were arriving late. These were the usual problems of a technological civilization, which Alex had previously considered mere annoyances, but now seemed like symptoms of something larger. But now Alex listened to them differently. He understood that his parents weren't just using technology, they were dependent on it.
And technology operated on principles no one understood.
It was like living in a house built by unknown architects using incomprehensible plans. Alex, you're quiet, the mother noted, sipping from a cup of aromatic tea. Think. About what? About how everything is arranged.
Don't think too much, Father smiled. It gives you a headache.
What if it's important?
What is important?
Understand how everything works.
Why?
The main thing is that it works. And if it stops?
Then we'll fix it.
And if we can't?
We can. There are always specialists.
Alex wanted to ask,
What if the specialist can't do it either? But he remained silent. He already knew the answer. Outside the window, the evening city sparkled with lights, but now this beauty seemed fragile to him, as if built on sand. After dinner, he returned to his room. K7PO brought him a glass of juice, cold, with a slightly tart hint of Naboo fruit, and said quietly, "Tomorrow you can ask me new questions."
Are you ready to learn more?
Ready.
Then good night, Alex.
Good night, K7PO.
The droid left, its footsteps fading quietly in the hallway, and Alex lay down on his bed and stared at the ceiling for a long time. Speeders continued to whiz past outside the window, their lights creating moving patterns on the room's walls. Somewhere, music was playing. Somewhere, people were laughing. Somewhere, machines were working. The day had brought more questions than answers. But now he knew the most important thing. He was not alone in his search. And tomorrow, he will learn something new. Chapter 5. Playing Detective. Alex sat in the schoolyard, the air thick with a mixture of aromas, the sweet scent of blooming gravity gardens, the metallic tang of the ventilation systems, and the faint aroma of synthetic food from the cafeteria. He watched the commotion around the broken window in the history classroom. The teachers gathered in a circle, discussing who could have committed this act of vandalism, their voices mingling with the excited cries of the students. Principal Weilon was already interrogating a group of seniors known for their mischief, clearly intent on finding the culprits among them. His voice sounded harsh against the monotonous hum of the air conditioning systems. It was definitely them. Alex heard a snatch of conversation from his math teacher, Mrs. Kiris, whose words cut through the noise of the holo projectors in the neighboring classrooms. Who else could have broken a window like that? Those 10th grade hooligans are always causing trouble. They need to be punished, the chemistry teacher agreed, adjusting his glasses. Damaging school property is a serious offense. But something about this situation nagged at Alex. He rose from the bench, an old, worn one, with the faded engravings of former students' names, and leisurely approached the scene, pretending to be simply curious. Small shards of transparasteel crunched underfoot, and the pungent smell of the classroom's damaged ventilation system hung in the air. The window had been broken from the inside. This was obvious from the arrangement of the shards on the ground, which sparkled with iridescent reflections in the artificial sunlight of the schoolyard. But the blow had struck too high for a student, even the tallest of the seniors, to have caused it. Moreover, according to the janitor, a stooped man with calloused hands who smelled of disinfectant, the window had been intact at 7 in the morning, and the first period in that classroom didn't start until 10. Alex walked around the building, his footsteps echoing off the Durasteel-clad walls. The hallways were thick with the distinctive smell of school, a mixture of cleaning products, plastic desks, and the faint aroma of synthetic food from the cafeteria. He peered into the classroom through the adjacent window. The desks stood in neat rows, their surfaces reflecting the cool light of the fluorescent panels. The chalkboard bore traces of yesterday's lesson on trade wars. Holographic maps of trade routes still flickered dimly. There was no sign of a fight or disorder. "Interesting," he muttered under his breath, his words lost in the constant hum of the school's life support systems. The recess bell rang sharply and shrilly, drowning out even the hum of the fans. The hallways instantly filled with hubbub, hundreds of voices merging into a single stream of sound. Somewhere, seniors were shouting, discussing the latest hologame. Younger students were squealing with delight, chasing each other between desks. Snippets of conversation could be heard. And then he said my essay on the Republic was complete nonsense. The new chemistry teacher is so weird. He keeps mumbling something. The cafeteria is full of that synthetic mess again today. Alex made his way through the crowd to his classmate Jack, whose father worked in school security. Along the way, he couldn't help but overhear a conversation. Two 7th grade students were loudly arguing over whether their history teacher had fairly given them a failing grade for incorrectly interpreting the events of the Mandalorian Wars. "He wasn't there himself," One of them, a red-haired boy with freckles, protested. "How does he know what really happened?" "He's just being picky," his friend chimed in. "My sister says he's deliberately failing everyone." Alex winced. Teacher injustice was a constant topic of conversation at school, but he was more interested in facts than emotions. "Listen, what do the surveillance cameras say?" he asked Jack casually when he finally reached him through the crowd. "Nothing special," Jack shrugged, chewing on a synthetic sandwich that smelled like fake meat. "Dad says there was no one in the hallway from 8 until 9:30. Only the cleaning droid passed by a couple of times." "A cleaning droid?" Alex asked, noticing a nearby group of students arguing about the fairness of their physics grades. "Could it have accidentally hit the window?" "Oh, come on," Jack laughed, his laughter drowned out by the general hubbub. "He's programmed not to break anything. Besides, he wasn't cleaning the classroom, he was cleaning the hallway." But Alex was already mentally constructing a different picture. He'd stayed late after school, ostensibly working in the library. The hallways were empty, and now only the monotonous hum of systems, ventilation, lighting, computer terminals, was audible. He carefully examined the hallway near the broken window. Almost imperceptible, traces of grease were visible on the floor. Oily stains that shimmered with iridescent reflections under the artificial light. This was the kind of grease used on older droids. The distinctive smell of an empty school hung in the air. Pungent, more so than usual, without the mitigating influence of hundreds of breaths. Somewhere, metal structures creaked, cooling after the day's work, and the quiet hum of nighttime security systems could be heard. The next morning, Alex arrived at school an hour earlier than usual. The hallways hadn't yet filled with the morning hubbub. Only the occasional teacher's footsteps and the monotonous hum of waking systems could be heard. He found a secluded spot in the library with a view of the corridor and began observing the cleaning droid U3PO. The old droid looked battered. Its once shiny frame was dull and scratched from years of use. The paint had peeled in several places, revealing age-darkened metal, and one of its sensors was blinking an alarming yellow instead of blue. The droid's left arm was particularly worn. It bore traces of numerous repairs, and the joints creaked with every movement. The droid moved methodically down the corridor, scrubbing the walls and floor, its servo motors emitting a distinctive whirring sound interspersed with the creaking of worn bearings. But Alex noticed that every few minutes the droid's left arm twitched, subtly but regularly. At first it seemed like normal work, but gradually the twitching intensified. The metal creaked, and the faint smell of superheated grease filled the air. Alex took out a notebook and began recording the time of each twitch. After half an hour of observation, he noticed a pattern. The glitches occurred every 47 minutes and were becoming increasingly intense. With each glitch, the droid emitted a quiet grinding sound, and its optical sensors momentarily flashed red. "Servoware," he whispered, his words lost in the morning hum of the waking school. "Or an overload in the control circuit." When the droid jerked its arm again, Alex realized what had happened the day before yesterday morning. U3PO was cleaning the hallway, and when the malfunction occurred, his arm jerked sharply to the side, striking the glass with such force that it shattered. Meanwhile, the school was filling with familiar sounds. The hallways echoed with students' voices, the clatter of feet, and the slamming of doors. The smell of synthetic breakfast and the clatter of dishes drifted from the cafeteria. Someone was loudly discussing their galactic history homework, complaining about the unfairness of Teacher Morrison, who, in their opinion, deliberately assigned impossible assignments. "He gave me a C on my essay about the old republic again," the 8th grade girl complained. "And I spent 3 hours writing." "He just doesn't like it when we think for ourselves," her classmate replied. "He wants us to only repeat what's in the textbook." As Alex passed the restrooms, he heard muffled sobs coming from one of the stalls. Someone was crying bitterly, and between the sobs, he could hear fragments of words. "Now my parents will kill me." The shards of a shattered datapad lay scattered on the stall floor. Apparently, someone had thrown it into the toilet in despair. Alex hesitated, but decided not to interfere. School dramas happened daily, and he couldn't solve all the problems of those around him.
But how could he prove his droid theory? And was it even worth it? Alex pondered this all day, watching the high school students being unfairly accused.
Principal Wei Lan had already summoned their parents and threatened expulsion, even though there was no real evidence of their guilt. The solution presented itself. The next day, based on his calculations, Alex approached his physics teacher, Mr. Taran. Class hadn't started yet, and the air was thick with the scent of the holoprojectors, mixed with the coffee the teacher was drinking. "Sir, what happens if the droid's servo starts to malfunction?" he asked, as if out of curiosity.
"Well," Taran mused, setting down his cup, which was emitting fragrant steam, "that could lead to unpredictable movements. Servos control the precision of the movements, and if they start to malfunction..." "Why do you ask?"
Just curious. If the glitches are regular, can you predict when the droid will completely break down?
Theoretically, yes, if you know the pattern.
Taran looked at Alex curiously.
It's quite a complex topic. The wear of mechanical parts follows certain mathematical laws.
Progressive wear usually follows an exponential curve. Alex nodded and walked away. Now all he had to do was wait. Outside the classroom window, the voices of students during recess could be heard. Some loudly arguing about the results of the bombing, others discussing the literature teacher's unfair grades. 3 days later, exactly at the time Alex had predicted, U3PO stopped in the middle of the corridor. His left arm began twitching uncontrollably, the metal creaking and screeching, and strange sounds emanated from the speaker, a mixture of static and distorted audio signals. A pungent smell of overheated electronic components and burnt insulation filled the air. The droid attempted to continue cleaning, but his movements became erratic, the mop swaying from side to side, splashing cleaning solution across the walls. "It seems U3PO is broken," Alex informed the duty teacher, who was just passing by, munching on a synthetic apple. When the repair technician arrived, a short man in greasy overalls, he confirmed the diagnosis: critical wear on the left arm servo. His tools clanked as he disassembled the droid's access panel, and the smell of burnt insulation grew stronger in the air. "Strange," the technician muttered, his words mingling with the noise of his instruments. "Usually these kinds of failures develop gradually. There should have been warning signs. Although, judging by the condition of this servo, it's been in need of replacement for a month now." "Could he have accidentally broken something?" Alex asked cautiously. "It certainly could," the technician nodded, removing the worn part. "With that much wear, the arm could have jerked with a force of several hundred kilograms. Any glass would have shattered." Principal Wei Lan frowned upon hearing the explanation. His face flushed with embarrassment, but his voice remained stern amid the hubbub of students gathered to observe the renovations. The charges against the seniors had been dropped, but no one apologized to them, which struck Alex as highly unfair. Indignant voices could be heard from the crowd of onlookers. "See? And we were the ones blamed! Teachers always think we're to blame. And if we hadn't sorted this out, we would have been expelled." "How did you know the droid would break today?" his classmate Mira asked him during lunch in the cafeteria, where the air was thick with the aroma of synthetic food and the clink of dishes. "I just noticed he was acting weird," Alex shrugged, stirring the artificial puree with a fork. "Sometimes his hand would twitch." "But you said the exact time," Mira insisted, her voice almost lost in the general hum of the cafeteria, where hundreds of students were eating, talking, and laughing at the same time. "Well, lucky, I guess." Alex didn't explain that 3 days ago he'd calculated the progression of failures and pinpointed the critical point of system failure. He didn't mention that he'd figured out the connection between the droid's malfunction and the broken window on the very first day. That evening at home, where the air was filled with the aroma of K7PO's cooking dinner and the quiet hum of his home systems could be heard, he wrote in his notebook, "People only see what they expect to see. Technology breaks down according to predictable laws. It's important not to stand out, even when you know the right answer."
K7PO, serving dinner. His servos were quiet and smooth, unlike the school droids, asked, as usual, "How are things at school, young master?" "It's fine," Alex replied, inhaling the aroma of real food, not synthetic. "Kay, do you ever have problems with your work?" "Sometimes minor errors in calculations occur," the droid answered honestly, his voice smooth, without the distortion that school U3PO had. "But the self-diagnostic system usually corrects them." "What if the self-diagnostic system also fails?" K7PO paused for a moment, as if considering the question. His optical sensors flickered blue. "That's an interesting question, young sir. I imagine that in that case, errors will accumulate to a critical level." "And what then?" "Then specialist intervention will be required to restore normal operation." Alex nodded, mentally adding another entry to his growing list of questions about how the world around him actually worked. Over dinner, Father talked about the problems at the shipyard. One of the assembly droids had started producing defective parts, and no one could figure out why. His voice sounded tired against the quiet hum of the home's systems. "The droid technicians say all systems are working properly," sighed Chiron, cutting into a piece of real meat that steamed deliciously. "But the quality of the work is declining every day. Already the third batch of parts has been defective." "Have you checked the self-diagnostic system?" Alex asked innocently. The father looked at his son in surprise. "I don't know. It's not my responsibility, but I'll tell them just in case. Although it sounds reasonable, if the droid can't figure out its own mistakes." Mother smiled. "Alex has a technical mindset. Maybe he should consider a career in engineering?" "Just logic," Alex replied modestly. But inside he felt a warm satisfaction. He was beginning to understand that his ability to see patterns where others saw chaos could be very useful. But he also realized that this ability must be used with caution. Overly precise predictions can attract unwanted attention. It's better to guide people to the right conclusions than to provide ready-made answers. Before bed, when the house was filled with silence, broken only by the soft hum of the night vision systems, Alex reviewed his notes again. The story with the cleaning droid was only the beginning. Around him lay a whole world, full of mysteries and patterns, waiting to be explored. He picked up a pen and wrote on a new page. Rule 1. Observe carefully. Rule 2. Look for patterns. Rule 3. Don't show that you know more than others. Looking at the third rule, he knew he would break it often. But for now, it was better to learn caution. In school, where the teacher's unfairness and the student's dramas created a constant background of tension, where old droids broke down predictably, and people saw only what they wanted to see. Chapter 6. The Little Entrepreneur. 12 years before the proclamation of the Empire. The morning light of Corellia's sun streamed through the high windows of the school cafeteria, casting long shadows between the rows of tables like golden swords slicing through the gloom. Alex Corrin sat in his usual spot by the wall, slowly chewing his synthetic breakfast, a tasteless porridge made from processed Mon Calamari seaweed that smelled of both sea and metal, and watched. Always watched. The tall windows of the dining hall offered a breathtaking view of the 43rd level of the Corellian metropolis. Below, like glowing dots in the morning mist, countless speeders scurried about, from sleek personal transports to massive cargo platforms, their repulsor lifts creating a constant hum, reminiscent of the breathing of a sleeping giant. And in the distance, like a floating city, one of the floating districts slowly drifted, a gigantic structure the size of a small asteroid, dotted with the lights of apartment blocks and shopping malls. Its anti-gravity engines left a shimmering trail in the morning air, and long communication antennas dangled from its underside like the tentacles of a cosmic kraken. At the next table, Jack Drayson, the son of a small transport business owner, a boy with perpetually tousled hair and grease stains on his fingers, who spoke with a distinctive Corellian accent, drawling his vowels,
was fiddling with a toy speeder. A miniature replica of Corellia's famed XP-38, it whirred and twitched as it barely rose above the tabletop, emitting sounds more like the wheezing of a dying droid than the melodic chant of real repulsors. "It's glitching again, the damn thing," Jack grumbled, slamming his fist into the toy's body so hard the neighboring kids looked over. "I bought it yesterday for 50 credits, and it's already acting up worse than an old truck." The school's public address system blared the haunting tune of the morning show, Holovision, a local version of the Tinkerer show where enthusiasts demonstrated their homemade inventions. "Welcome to the world of technical wonders, where anyone can become a master, where old parts are given new life, and the impossible becomes simple." Alex listened to the conversation, putting down his spoonful of porridge, which left a rather unpleasant aftertaste and a faint aroma of artificial spices. Next to Jack sat Mira Thanos, the daughter of a shipyard technician, a girl with a sharp chin and attentive gray eyes, who always spoke clearly and to the point without wasting words, playing with a portable hologame, a crude version of the popular asteroid chase. The screen flickered with dull colors, and the control buttons made faint clicking sounds when pressed. "It's the same for me," she complained in her characteristically low voice, tinged with irritation. "Reactions are so slow. You'll grow old before the ship even turns." "It's like you're piloting a cargo barge in molasses, not a fighter jet." From the nearby Stardust Cafe, located on the first floor of the school complex, came the haunting melody of a popular song that had been playing for 3 weeks in a row. "Among the stars we fly into the distance, the Corellian wind in the sails. There is no sadness, no obstacles, in our brave hearts." The melody was so cloying and repetitive that Alex could already see some students involuntarily singing along to the chorus without even noticing it. Alex finished his bantha juice, a slightly sweet drink with a hint of exotic fruit and artificial preservatives, and stood up, approaching their table with the most innocent expression. His movements were leisurely, calculated, as if he'd simply happened to be nearby. "Can I see it?" he asked in a soft voice, pointing at the speeder. Jack shrugged and handed over the toy, muttering something unflattering under his breath about the quality of modern goods. Alex picked it up, feeling a slight vibration in the casing, irregular, intermittent, indicating a system imbalance. He turned it over and found the access panel to the power cell. Inside, in addition to the standard battery, was a tiny repulsor unit, a cheap replica of the real systems that lifted speeders, speeder bikes, and even light transports. The crystals inside glowed a dull reddish light instead of the expected blue, and the connecting elements were made of low-grade metal that was already beginning to oxidize. "The problem is with the frequency setting," Alex said, handing the toy back and trying to speak casually, as if it were obvious to anyone. "The repulsor is running at too low a power level, and the stabilizers can't compensate for the fluctuations. Besides, the crystals are third-rate. They quickly lose resonance." Jack stared at him, his mouth slightly open. "How do you know that, boy? What kind of technician are you?" "My father works in the shipyards," Alex answered evasively, shrugging. "I heard a lot of things over dinner." This was true, but not entirely. His father had indeed worked in the shipyards, but Alex had learned the workings of repulsors himself, disassembling broken devices and reading technical manuals in the library. Most of them were simplified, aimed at users rather than technicians, but even in them, useful information could be found if you knew what to look for. A heavy cargo speeder thundered past the window, its engines emitting a deep, bass roar that rattled the windows. An advertisement for the new energy drink, Hyperspeed, adorned its side, and the same haunting melody from the cafe blared from the speakers. "Can you fix it?" Mira asked, holding out her hologame. Her fingers were thin but strong, the hands of someone accustomed to working with small parts. Alex picked up the device and activated it. A small screen displayed an image of a spaceship amidst slowly moving asteroids. He tried the controls. The ship turned with a noticeable delay, as if floating in thick syrup, and the sound effects were muffled and distorted. "I can try," he said finally, turning off the game. "But not here. I have tools at home. That's how it all began. That evening, in his room, permeated with the ozone of electronics and the faint aroma of machine oil, Alex laid out his tools on the table and carefully examined both toys. Outside, dusk was gathering, and the city was beginning to glow with a million lights, from the warm yellow glow of home windows to the cool blue glow of advertising holograms. Speeders whizzed past with the distinctive whistle of repulsor lifts, their headlights casting streaks of light through the evening air, like shooting stars in reverse. The speeder turned out to be simpler. All he needed to do was replace one of the stabilizing crystals with a more powerful one. Alex had a whole set of these crystals, salvaged from old devices he'd found in a storage room full of old junk. Each crystal had its own characteristic glow and resonant frequency, and Alex had already learned to determine their quality by their appearance. The hologame took longer to fix. The problem lay in the processor, a cheap chip that couldn't handle the control commands. Alex couldn't replace it, but he found a way to optimize it by reprogramming some functions through the service menu. The work required patience and precision. One wrong move could render the game useless. The sounds of dinner preparation drifted from the kitchen, the sizzle of oil in a frying pan, the melodic hum of K7PO, and the hushed voices of my parents discussing work. The smell of roasting Nerf meat mingled with the aroma of spices, creating a cozy atmosphere of homely warmth. 2 days later, he returned the toys to their owners. The speeder now flew smoothly and confidently. Its repulsors emitted a melodic hum, and its movements became precise and predictable. The hologame responded instantly to commands, the sounds became clear, and the graphics were bright and contrasting. "Incredible!" Jack exclaimed, launching the speeder into a flight around the classroom. The toy described smooth arcs, rising and falling with the grace of a real aircraft. "It flies better than new, better than advertised." Mira was delighted with the speed of her game's response. The spaceship now responded instantly to commands, and asteroid explosions were accompanied by realistic sound effects. Soon, a crowd of classmates gathered around them, all eager to try out the improved toys. The Holovision program continued to play from the school speakers. Every detail has a soul. Every screw has its own story. The master knows their secrets and creates his victories. "Alex, can you fix my blaster?" asked Court Salonius, the spice merchant's son, a boy with the gentle manners and polite speech typical of merchant families. "It fires, but the sound is weak, not at all like a real one." "And my pet droid doesn't even walk," added Lana Antilles, from a collateral branch of the famous Corellian family, speaking with that distinctive aristocratic accent that betrayed her lineage. "She just lies there and blinks her eyes, like a dying firefly." Alex felt the gears turning in his head. He saw an opportunity, and it was too good to pass up. There were dozens of children around him with broken or malfunctioning toys, and he had the knowledge and skills to fix them. "Okay," he said, trying to sound businesslike but not too greedy. "But it will take time, and I need materials."
Not for free.
"How much?" asked Court, taking a small wallet out of his pocket. Alex quickly calculated. A new toy cost between 50 and 100 credits. Repairs at an official workshop would cost 20 to 30, but they often simply replaced entire parts without bothering with proper repairs. 15 credits for repairs, 25 for upgrades, he said, after a pause long enough to show he was seriously considering the price. It was cheaper than an official repair, but more expensive than a friendly service. It was a happy medium that satisfied everyone. "We have a deal," Court nodded, and his voice carried the satisfaction of a man who had made a good deal. Within a week, Alex had 5 orders. He converted his room into a mini workshop, laying out tools on the table and organizing components in old shoeboxes. Each box was labeled and contained a specific type of part: crystals, conductors, batteries, microchips. K7PO initially expressed concern about the clutter, but Alex assured the droid that everything was under control. "Young master," the droid said in its melodic voice, "don't you think your room is starting to resemble a spare parts warehouse?" "It's organized chaos, K7PO," Alex replied, calibrating another crystal. Everything has its place. The problem arose when he ran out of crystals and microchips. Alex realized he needed a supply chain. Digging through dumpsters for old electronics was inefficient and unpredictable. The solution came during lunch in the school cafeteria. Alex ordered his usual meal, a synthetic burger with fake meat, which smelled of spices and had the texture of real beef, a side of crispy on the outside, soft on the inside fries, and a glass of fruit juice. The food was quite edible, though it couldn't compare to home cooking. "I'll have the large combo number 3, he told the droid vendor, with extra sauce and no onions. "It will be ready in 3 minutes, young master," the droid replied, its manipulators already beginning to assemble the order with mechanical precision. Rick Soldano, the son of the electronics store owner, a thin boy with quick movements and lively dark eyes who spoke in a clipped manner, as if he were always in a hurry, was complaining about a dull weekend at the next table. "Rick," Alex said, sitting down next to him with a tray, "want to do some extra work?" "Depends on what it is," Rick answered cautiously, taking a bite of his sandwich. "As long as it's something legal and not too complicated." "I need components, crystals, light threads, batteries, nothing special, just regular spare parts, but regularly." "From Dad's store?" Rick frowned, chewing more slowly. "He'll notice if anything goes missing. He's got it all accounted for, down to the last screw." "It won't go to waste," Alex smiled, sipping his juice. "I'll pay full price plus 10% for delivery and convenience." Rick thought for a moment, his fingers drumming on the table. 10% of the turnover was a decent amount of pocket money for a 9-year-old, especially considering there was hardly any work to be had. "Okay," he finally agreed. "But if problems arise—" "There won't be any problems," Alex assured him. "Everything is fair and open." The next step was access to more advanced tools. Alex knew that Tessa Corita, the master mechanic's daughter, a girl with strong hands and a direct gaze, who spoke slowly, carefully considering every word, often found herself bored in her father's workshop after school. He approached her with a proposal during recess, as she sat alone reading a speeder repair manual. "I need to use good tools sometimes," he explained, sitting down next to me. "A soldering iron with adjustable temperature, a frequency calibrator, maybe a diagnostic scanner. An hour or 2 after school." "Why?" Tessa asked, not looking up from her book. "I fix toys for kids, a small business." Tessa raised her head and looked at him carefully. She was a practical girl, raised in a family of artisans, where every tool had its value and every time had its price. "What do I get out of this?" 5 credits for each visit," Alex said. "Plus, you can help out if you want. I'll teach you how to work with electronics." Tessa closed the book and fell into thought. She was interested in learning the technique, but her father was always too busy to teach her the intricacies of the craft. "Agreed," she said, "but no experiments with dangerous things." By the end of the month, Alex had a well-oiled system. Rick supplied components, carefully packing them into small boxes and delivering them directly to the school. Tessa provided access to professional tools and assisted with simple operations, quickly grasping the basics of electronics. Alex himself handled diagnostics, repairs, and upgrades, constantly honing his skills. Tessa's workshop emanated a strange fumes from the welding machines. The sounds of the tools at work created a special atmosphere. The quiet hum of the soldering iron, the clicking of the calibrator, the melodic beeps of the diagnostic scanner. It was the music of technical creativity, and Alex savored every note. Orders came in regularly. Alex not only repaired broken toys, but also improved new ones. His reputation grew, and soon even high school students were turning to him, bringing more complex devices, laptops, music players, even simple droids. He kept detailed records in a special notebook. What exactly he did with each toy, what components he used, how much time he spent on each. This helped him refine the process and set fair prices. Each page was covered in neat handwriting, diagrams interspersed with calculations, and small notes about the character of his clients adorned the margins.
But most importantly, Alex studied people. He noticed who was willing to pay more for quality, who would haggle until the last loan, who was likely to become a regular customer, and who would only come once. He recorded these observations, creating a kind of database of his classmates' personalities and preferences. Another flying block floated past the workshop window, its lights reflecting off the tools, creating a whimsical interplay of light and shadow. The speeders below looked like glowing dots, their hum blending into a single symphony of urban life. Problems began when his activities were noticed by teachers. Alex, Mrs. Dantois, the technology teacher, a middle-aged woman with attentive eyes and a habit of speaking slowly, weighing every word, addressed him after class. "I heard that you repair toys." "Sometimes I help my friends," Alex answered cautiously, gathering his things slowly so as not to show his anxiety. "Show me one of these toys." Alex pulled out a hologame from his backpack, one he'd recently upgraded for one of the younger students. The device looked ordinary on the outside, but the internal modifications had dramatically improved its performance. Mrs. Dantois turned it on and played for a few minutes, raising her eyebrows in surprise at each rapid turn of the virtual ship. "This is very high-quality work," she said finally, turning off the game. "Too high quality for a 9-year-old. Who's helping you?" "Nobody," Alex replied. "I'm just carefully examining the devices." "Alex," Mrs. Dantois sat on the edge of the table, a note of genuine concern creeping into her voice. "I've been working with technology for 20 years. What you did with this game requires a deep understanding of how processors and control systems work. Where did you get that knowledge?" Alex realized he'd fallen into a trap. He didn't want to tell the truth, that he'd spent hours poring over technical manuals, disassembling complex devices, and experimenting with components. It would have looked too suspicious for a child his age. "My father is a technician at the shipyard," he repeated. "He explains a lot to me, and I also read a lot of technical books in the library." "Which books exactly?" Alex named several beginner's guides he'd actually read, though they only provided basic information. He tried to speak naturally, as if it were the ordinary hobby of an inquisitive child. Mrs. Dantois nodded, but there was still a hint of suspicion in her eyes. "Okay, but be careful. Some components can be dangerous if you don't know how to handle them. Crystals can overheat, batteries can explode." "I understand," Alex nodded. "I always follow safety precautions." When the teacher left, Alex realized he needed to change his approach. Attracting the adults' attention was dangerous. They might start asking awkward questions or, worse, forbid him from doing the renovations, citing safety concerns. At home, Alex pondered the problem for a long time, sitting by the window and watching the evening city. The lights from the speeders created glowing rivers in the air, and the same haunting melody still wafted from the cafe below. He didn't want to stop his work. It brought him not only money, but also valuable experience. But he needed to make it less noticeable. The solution came unexpectedly while he was listening to the news on the radio. A reporter was talking about new tax breaks for small businesses. And Alex realized the problem wasn't that he was doing renovations, but how it looked from the outside. Instead of openly engaging in repairs, he could have adopted a more subtle system. No direct sales, no service advertisements, only friendly services and mutual assistance. The next day, Alex announced the new rules to his clients, gathering them in an empty classroom during recess. "I don't charge for repairs anymore," he said, trying to sound casual, "but if you'd like to thank me, I'm fine with it. A gift, a treat, or just helping me with something else." The guys got the hint. Now, instead of direct payment, they gifted Alex credits, sweets, or small favors. Formally, it looked like a friendly exchange, not a commercial activity. Alex also changed his way of working. Instead of taking toys home, he repaired them in Tessa's workshop, making it feel like a shared hobby
rather than a business. He and Tessa spent time after school exploring gadgets and sharing knowledge, and toy repair seemed like a side effect of their technical experiments. These changes made his activities virtually invisible to adults, but no less effective. Moreover, the new system taught Alex an important lesson. Sometimes the best way to achieve a goal is to make sure no one notices you're working toward it. By the end of the school year, Alex had accumulated nearly 500 credits and earned a reputation as someone who could solve any technical problem. More importantly, he had built a network of useful contacts and learned how to work with people. Rick became a reliable supplier, Tessa a loyal partner, and dozens of classmates became satisfied clients willing to recommend his services to others. That evening, counting his earnings in his room, permeated with the scent of tech creativity, Alex reflected on what he'd learned over the past few months. Outside, the floating city drifted slowly toward the spaceport, its lights reflected in the glass, and the speeders below continued their endless dance. He understood that people are willing to pay not only for results, but also for convenience. That reputation is more important than quick profit. That sometimes it's better to remain in the shadows than to attract unnecessary attention. And that every person has a price, not necessarily monetary, but always measurable in terms of needs and desires. But most importantly, he realized that his abilities were truly extraordinary. What seemed natural to him astonished others. It was both an advantage and a danger, a tool and a trap. Alex closed the notebook and put the money away. The holidays started tomorrow, and he had big plans. His father promised to take him to the shipyards more often, which meant access to more interesting equipment and new learning opportunities. The same melody still wafted from the cafe downstairs, but it no longer irritated him. On the contrary, it had become part of the soundtrack of his first business success, a reminder that even the most obsessive things can become habitual if you know how to live with them. Chapter 7. Uncle's Return. Alex awoke to the familiar sound of landing engines. The low hum, which vibrated the windows, was too powerful for ordinary urban transport. The air was filled with the distinctive smell of ionized particles and hot metal, the faithful companions of ships landing in the atmosphere. He jumped out of bed and looked out the window, just in time to see a battered, dynamic-class freighter touch down on a private landing pad 2 blocks from their house. The ship was old, but well-maintained. Its hull was coated with cosmic dust and traces of micrometeorites, but the engines ran smoothly, and the landing was flawless. The insignia of the freighter company Galactic Cargo was visible on board. Alex realized this was a delivery for Uncle Garrick. Even from a distance, the characteristic stains from Kessel's acid rain and the faded patches of hull left by the radiation of distant stars were visible. "Alex!" came his mother's voice from below, drowning out the gradually fading roar of the engines. "Breakfast is ready!" "I'm coming!" he shouted back, but didn't move away from the window. A familiar figure emerged from the ship, a tall man in a worn leather jacket, with a graying beard and a confident gait. Garrett Corrin, my father's younger brother, was greeting the cargo ship after 5 years as a mechanic on merchant ships. Even from a distance, it was clear he was surveying the surroundings with the attentive gaze of a seasoned traveler, accustomed to constant change. At breakfast, the parents discussed Garrick's return with barely concealed anxiety. The aroma of fresh toast and Corellian jam hung in the air, but the atmosphere was tense. "I wonder what brought him home this time," my father grumbled, spreading jam on his toast. He worked on merchant ships for 5 years and then suddenly decided to come back. "Kieran," his mother chided him gently. "He's your brother, and he's always been a good uncle to Alex." "A good uncle, but a bad example," my father sighed. "A merchant, a mechanic, an adventurer, not the most stable life." Alex remained silent, but internally disagreed with his father. Uncle Garrick was the only adult who didn't consider his questions intrusive or his curiosity a flaw. Moreover, it was his uncle who taught him the basics of tool use during one of his visits and explained how ships were built. "Can I go see him?" Alex asked. "After school,"
my father said sternly. And don't stay out too late. The school day dragged on endlessly. The familiar hum of city traffic could be heard outside the classroom windows, occasionally interrupted by the distinctive whistle of high-speed bikes.
Alex struggled to concentrate on his lessons, constantly thinking about his uncle. What had he seen during his travels? What worlds had he visited? What stories had he brought back with him? Finally, the bell rang, and Alex rushed home, barely saying goodbye to his friends. After changing into his lounge clothes, he headed for the landing pad. The route led through the old quarters of Coronet, where the narrow streets lingered with the scent of spices from the local market. A door slammed on the third floor of one of the buildings, and Alex couldn't help but look up. A drunken Zabrak figure flashed in the doorway, muttering something under his breath in broken Basic. A young Twi'lek stood next to him, clearly embarrassed by his state. Noticing the boy's gaze, she quickly slammed the door shut, but for a moment, Alex caught a glimpse of a bare nipple through the neckline of her robe. A strange feeling stirred in his chest, but he quickly looked away and hurried on, not fully understanding the nature of the sensation. The cargo ship had already departed, but crates of equipment and some unfamiliar devices sat near the landing pad. The air smelled of ozone and metal, mingled with the aroma of exotic spices, sure signs of long journeys. "Alex!" came a familiar voice with the distinctive clicking sound my uncle called Space Wolf talk. "Look how big you've grown, kid!" Uncle Garrick emerged from behind a pile of crates, wiping his hands with a rag. He had changed little in the year since his last visit, except that his beard was grayer, and the wrinkles around his eyes had deepened from constantly gazing into the starry distances. But most importantly, his eyes still shone with a lively interest in everything around them. "Uncle Garrick!" Alex rushed towards him, and his uncle caught him in a tight embrace that smelled of distant worlds. "Come on, let me see you, my dear," Garrick said, holding his nephew at arm's length. 9 years old, right? And almost waist-high already. You'll catch up with your father soon." "What's all this?" Alex asked, pointing to the boxes of equipment. "Oh, that?" Uncle smiled, and his voice took on a distinctive tone. "I've decided to settle down for a while, kid. Tired of constantly jumping through hyperspace. I'm planning on opening a droid repair shop. There's always a demand for quality work on Corellia, you know." "Droid repair?" Alex's eyes lit up. "Exactly, nephew. In 5 years of working on merchant ships, I've seen droids of all makes and models. I've learned to fix things others consider hopeless. Want to help an old wolf set up a lair?" Alex nodded so vigorously that his uncle laughed his characteristic low laugh. They spent the next 2 hours moving equipment into an old storage space his uncle had rented near the landing pad. The air was stale, filled with the smell of old metal and dust, but gradually became filled with the scent of lubricants and ozone from the new equipment. Alex examined each item with interest. He had never seen tools here before. "This is a KL-36 diagnostic scanner," my uncle explained, setting the complex device on the workbench. "It can analyze any droid system and find faults down to the component level." "What's this?" Alex pointed to a device that looked like a metal glove with numerous wires. "A neural interface." My uncle carefully took the device. "It allows you to directly connect to a droid's mind for in-depth diagnostics. A very rare item, bought from a merchant on Tatooine. The cunning Tusken wanted half my savings for it, but it was worth it." "Can I try?" "Not yet, lad." Uncle shook his head. "This is serious equipment. You need to learn the basics first." Alex nodded, but mentally remembered where his uncle had placed the interface. While they were setting up the workshop, the news came from the holoprojector. The announcer's voice monotonously recounted the day's events. Today, news broke of a sex scandal involving Justicar Valorum of the Chommel sector. According to unconfirmed reports, the high-ranking official was spotted in the company of several Twi'leks at one of Coruscant's elite establishments. "These politicians again," Uncle grumbled, adjusting the scanner settings. "It's the same thing all over the galaxy. Power corrupts." Merchant ship captains have announced a boycott of the new transponders introduced by the Trade Federation. They claim the new devices not only increase shipping costs, but also allow for the tracking of all independent traders' movements. Now that's more serious, Uncle said, listening to the news. Transponders are the foundation of navigational safety. If captains are boycotting them, it's not just about money. Economic analyst Sim Olay warned of an impending galactic crisis. He said he had already predicted a decline in the value of credits on Coruscant and problems in the Nimban sector. The Trade Federation has too much influence on the Republic economy, Olay declared. This Olay has been predicting a crisis for 10 years now, my uncle chuckled. Sooner or later, he'll hit the nail on the head. Protests against the introduction of hidden taxes on Ryla exports continue on the planet Ryloth. Demonstrators are demanding the resignation of the planetary governor, accusing him of corruption and ties to criminal syndicates. Ryle, my uncle said thoughtfully. A valuable commodity. No wonder there's so much intrigue surrounding it. Alex listened carefully to the news, gradually realizing that the galaxy was a much more complex and dangerous place than they had taught him at school. While they were setting up the workshop, Uncle told stories of his travels, about outer rim worlds where old Republic-era droids were still used, about trading posts where you could find spare parts for any kind of technology, about strange planets where the locals created unique modifications of standard droids. I saw a dancer droid on Ryloth, my uncle recounted, connecting the power cables. His voice took on a dreamy tone. The Twi'leks modified a standard protocol droid, adding flexibility and grace. It moved better than any organic, believe me, old wolf. And on Coruscant? On Coruscant, everything is standard and dull, Uncle shrugged. Mass production, standard solutions. But you can find the most modern models there. True, for that kind of money, it's easier to buy your own ship. Where are the most interesting droids? Uncle thought for a moment, and silence fell over the workshop, broken only by the quiet hum of the equipment. You know, kid, the most interesting droids are the ones that can work for a long time without a full memory reset. They evolve. They become almost alive. I saw an astromech on the Corellian's Luck freighter, R2-D4. He'd been working without a reset for about 20 years, so he couldn't just figure out navigation. He could sense the captain's mood and even understand jokes. Alex remembered these words, feeling that some important truth was hidden in them. A week later, the workshop was ready for business. The air was filled with the smells of fresh paint and new equipment, mingled with the aroma of coffee, which Uncle constantly brewed in an old Turkish coffee pot. Uncle posted flyers in several areas of the city, and soon the first clients arrived. The first was a fruit vendor from the local market, a plump man with a kindly face, his clothes exuding the sweet aroma of Corellian peaches. His household droid had stopped recognizing voice commands.
It's a simple problem. Look, Uncle explained to Alex as he disassembled the droid's head. The audio sensors are clogged with dust. They just need to be cleaned and calibrated.
Alex watched the process closely. His uncle worked confidently but unhurriedly, explaining each step in his distinctive accent.
See these crystals, boy?
Uncle pointed to the small transparent structures inside the droid's head.
They convert sound waves into electrical signals. If they're dirty, the quality of recognition drops below that of an old Gundark's hearing.
How do you clean them?
With a special solvent and an ultrasonic bath. But be careful, the crystals are as fragile as Nexu eggs.
An hour later, the droid understood commands perfectly again, and the merchant left satisfied, having paid 20 credits and leaving the workshop smelling of fresh fruit. The next client was a freighter pilot, a wiry man with a weathered face and hands scarred from handling machinery. His R4 astromech droid had begun producing inaccurate navigational calculations.
This is more serious, nephew, said my uncle, connecting the diagnostic scanner. Navigation systems are the foundation of flight safety. A miscalculation could send a ship straight into the heart of a star.
The problem turned out to be a damaged memory module. Uncle showed Alex how to carefully remove the module, test it with a special tester, and install a new one. Droid memory is organized in a special way, lad, he explained. It's not like regular computers. They use crystal matrices that can store not only data, but also, let's call it, experience.
Experience?
Yes, my dear. Droids learn, especially astromechs. They remember the characteristics of each ship, the pilot's preferences, even anomalies in the behavior of various systems. A good astromech is worth its weight in orums. Alex considered these words. So, the droids weren't just machines, but something more?
Gradually, Alex began helping his uncle with the simplest operations. At first, it was simply handing him tools, but soon his uncle trusted him to replace power supplies and clean contacts. The boy quickly became accustomed to the smells of the workshop, the ozone from electrical discharges, metal dust, lubricants, and the distinctive aroma emitted by the droids in operation.
"You've got good hands, boy," his uncle said approvingly, watching Alex carefully extract a power cell from a household droid. "Precise movements, no rush. That's important when working with delicate systems." Alex beamed with praise. Finally, he'd found an adult who not only understood his interests, but was willing to nurture them. "Uncle, can I try to calibrate the sensors?" "You can, kid, but under my supervision. Calibration isn't just a technical procedure.
You need to understand how the droid will be used, the conditions it will operate in." Alex spent the next hour studying the intricacies of sensor system tuning. It turned out that each droid required an individual approach, even if it was a standard model. A wide variety of people passed through the workshop, each bringing their own sense and stories. Alex quickly learned to read clients, who was willing to pay for quality work, who would haggle, and who might cause problems. The long-haul pilots were especially interesting. They brought droids of unusual modifications and told stories of distant worlds. They always smelled of space, that unique aroma of ozone, metal, and infinity. "I bought this little one on Nal Hutta," Captain Drake explained, gesturing to the small translator droid. The captain smelled of expensive cigars and exotic perfume. "He knows languages not found in standard databases." "The Hutt languages?" asked my uncle. "Not only that, my friend, there are also ancient dialects, trade jargons, even some ritualistic idioms. Sometimes it seems he knows more than he should." Alex listened attentively to these conversations. Gradually, a picture of the galaxy began to emerge in his mind that was very different from what he'd seen in school textbooks. The world was far more complex and interesting than it seemed. One day, a man in exquisite clothing, but with wary eyes, came to them. He smelled of expensive cologne, but beneath it lay the scent of fear, sour and pungent. He brought a protocol droid and asked for a complete memory wipe. "Standard procedure," he said, but Alex noticed the tension in his voice. "Selling the droid, wanting to remove personal information." The uncle agreed, but when the client left, he looked seriously at Alex. "Remember, boy," he said quietly, "sometimes people ask us to do things that seem simple, but actually hide something important." A complete memory wipe could destroy evidence of a crime or witness testimony. And what to do in such cases? Think, analyze, and make decisions you can live with. You get it? Alex nodded, realizing that his uncle was teaching him a lesson that couldn't be found in any textbook. By the end of the month, Alex could already perform basic droid maintenance on his own. His hands had become accustomed to the tools, and his nose to the smells of the workshop. His uncle gave him his own set of tools, not toy ones, but real professional ones. "These are yours, boy," he said, handing Alex a metal case. "Take care of them. A good tool is an extension of the master's hands." Alex opened the case and saw screwdrivers, calibrators, testers, and other devices neatly arranged. Each tool was labeled with his name. The new tools exuded the scent of fresh metal. "Thank you, Uncle," he said, barely containing his emotions.
You're welcome, kid. You deserve it.
That evening, at home, Alex reflected on the past month. Outside the window, he could hear the familiar sounds of evening coronet, the hum of traffic, the voices of passers-by, the distant murmur of the spaceport. Working in his uncle's workshop had opened up a new world to him, a world of real technology, complex systems, and interesting people. He realized that his abilities weren't just unusual. They could become the foundation for a serious profession. But most importantly, he had a mentor. Someone who understood his interests and was willing to nurture them. Someone who didn't consider his questions strange or his curiosity a flaw. Someone who spoke with the distinctive patois of a space wolf and saw droids as more than just machines. Alex opened his journal and wrote, "Uncle Garrick says droids can evolve if their memories aren't rebooted for a long time. I wonder how far this evolution can go. And what happens to droids that work for decades?" He closed the journal and put it away. Tomorrow after school, he'd go to the workshop again. His uncle had promised to show him how to work with battle droids. They required special handling due to their built-in security systems. The faint scent of night-blooming flowers from a Corellian garden wafted through the window, mingling with the scents of the big city. Somewhere in the distance, a ship was taking off, its engines briefly illuminating the sky with a bluish glow. 9-year-old Alex Corrin fell asleep thinking about crystalline matrices, neural interfaces, and mysterious droids who knew more than they should. Uncle Garrick's distinctive cadence echoed in his dreams, and somewhere deep in his mind, the realization formed that his life had changed forever. Chapter 8. Secrets of R4K9. 11 years before the proclamation of the Empire. Alex noticed the droid on his first day at the workshop, but it wasn't until a month later that he decided to ask about it.
The old astromech droid R4K9 stood in the far corner, half hidden by a tarp and crates of spare parts. Its blue hull was faded with age, and its dome was covered in scratches and dents. Uncle Garrick's workshop was a veritable kingdom of mechanical wonders and technological chaos. Endless rows of shelves lined the walls, filled with boxes of every imaginable size, from tiny containers of microchips to massive crates of power modules. Each box held its own treasure, shimmering energy crystals emitting a faint bluish glow, precision components of polished durasteel, sensor modules resembling precious stones in their transparent packaging. The center of the workshop was occupied by a massive dark metal work table, scratched and stained by years of use. Its surface was in an organized state of disarray. Half-disassembled droids lay here, their innards neatly arranged like the pieces of a complex puzzle. Manipulators of various sizes sat next to processor units. Power cells rested next to holoprojectors, and thin light guides intertwined between the components like silvery snakes. "Uncle, what about that droid?" Alex asked, pointing to the corner where a familiar silhouette could be seen behind a humming power generator. Garrick followed his nephew's gaze, continuing to work on the protocol droid's sensor module. His skilled fingers continued to manipulate the microscopic components as he answered. Somewhere in the depths of the workshop, a diagnostic scanner hummed monotonously, and the muffled sounds of jizz music, his uncle's favorite tune during his meticulous work, were emanating from an old holo player on a shelf. "Old junk," Garrick shrugged, finally setting the tool down. "I bought it for 50 credits from a scrap dealer on Nar Shaddaa. Thought I could fix it, but it's as dead as an asteroid. It won't even turn on." In the corner of the workshop, like a crypt of forgotten mechanisms, piles of discarded parts towered. Robot arms from various eras and models intertwined in a strange metal tangle. Luminous threads hung like technological vines, and wires of every color of the rainbow formed a tangled carpet on the floor. Uncle Garrick couldn't bring himself to throw out this junk. He saw potential in every part, an opportunity for future repair or unexpected use. "Can I see it?" Alex asked, looking at the mysterious droid in fascination. "Of course, but don't waste too much time on him. Better focus on the droids that can actually be repaired." Alex nodded, but was already mentally planning how to approach the mysterious R4K9. Meanwhile, his uncle returned to his work,
and soon the air was filled with a quiet grumbling again. Garrick had a habit of commenting on the work of previous repairmen, and these comments were rarely complimentary.
"What kind of idiot did that?" he muttered under his breath, extracting an incorrectly installed module from the depths of the protocol droid. He connected the light-emitting diode to the audio crystal and then stuck the power cable in the COM port. How can anyone work like that? Where's the respect for the craft? His hands must have been growing from the wrong place. That evening, when his uncle finished work and went home, leaving behind only the faint aroma of tobacco, Alex remained in the workshop. The holo player was still quietly playing a silly song about Twi'lek sadness. The tune was annoying, but catchy. Everyone was crazy about it. Ah, these Leku are caressed by others. Ah, her gentle hands. Blue shoulders, blue eyes. Separation, separation, separation. She danced in a distant cantina, wriggling gracefully, and now I wander sadly among the stars, lonely and menacing. Ah, these Leku are like living snakes. They once wrapped themselves around me, but my beautiful maiden has gone away, and only pain and longing remained. The chorus was repeated with a trembling voice. Ah, these Leku are caressed by others. Others. Other. Alex shook his head, trying to forget the image of the Leku. For some reason, at that moment, he remembered a nipple he'd once accidentally seen. Ugh. He shook his head, trying to remember something even more annoying, to banish the unwanted images from his mind. Enough, we have to work. He slid aside the heavy crates of spare parts, each carefully labeled in his uncle's handwriting. MK7 series sensors, low power cells, holo projectors, requires calibration. Pulling the tarpaulin off the droid, Alex revealed R4K9 in all its faded glory. The droid was an older model, heavier and more angular than modern astromech units. Its body bore the marks of numerous repairs and modifications, every scratch telling a story, every patch a testimony to the adventures it had endured. Alex activated the diagnostic scanner, a device the size of a datapad but considerably more sophisticated. Its screen lit up with a multitude of colored indicators, and the air filled with the quiet hum of active sensors. Pointing the scanner at the droid, the young man began to study the readings. The screen revealed a strange picture. The primary systems were intact, the power cell was charged to 70%, but all functions were blocked by some internal barrier. Interesting, Alex muttered, studying the readings in the flickering light of the diagnostic indicators. You're not broken, you're just asleep. He ran a deeper scan, switching the device to detailed analysis mode. The scanner hummed louder, its sensors penetrating deep into the droid's electronic architecture, and Alex soon discovered the problem. The droid's identity module had been damaged, and the security systems had blocked all functions, interpreting it as an unauthorized access attempt.
It's a clever defense, Alex admitted, shaking his head in admiration. But it's not perfect. For the next 2 weeks, Alex worked with R4K9 every evening, turning the far corner of the workshop into his personal laboratory. His uncle didn't mind. He considered it good practice, even if the droid didn't work. Moreover, Garrick would occasionally come over to watch his nephew's work, commenting on the peculiarities of the older models. The atmosphere of the evening workshop was conducive to meticulous work. The bustle of the day had died down, the other mechanics had gone home, and a special stillness hung in the air, broken only by the soft jazz music from the holo player and the steady hum of the cooling fans. The work lamps created islands of bright light in the ocean of gloom, and crystals and LEDs twinkled in boxes on the shelves like a technological constellation. The architecture of older droids was far more complex than modern ones. Each system had multiple redundant circuits, as if the engineers of that era were preparing for galactic war. Components were interchangeable and modular, making them more reliable, but also more difficult to understand. Wires here didn't simply connect components. They formed a complex neural network where every connection had its purpose. They built them to last,
Uncle explained, watching Alex work and cursing at yet another shoddy repair on another droid. Modern droids are simpler, but less durable. Manufacturing savings, damn it. Look at the idiot who installed that stabilizer. He didn't even bother to check the insulation. Alex carefully removed the damaged identification module, working in the light of a desk lamp that cast sharp shadows on his focused face. The crystalline matrix inside was cracked but not completely destroyed. Fine fracture lines crisscrossed its surface like a web. Studying the schematic in the holoprojector's light, he realized he could not only repair the module, but modify it. "Uncle, do you have spare crystals for old models?" Garrick paused from grumbling over a poorly repaired servo and rummaged through one of the countless drawers. The sound of the parts being rummaged mingled with the jazz melody, creating a unique workshop symphony.
There must be some somewhere. Ah, here.
He pulled out a small box containing several crystals resting on a soft surface and shimmering in the lamplight.
Try these. They're from the R2 series, but they should work.
Alex took the crystals, each the size of a fingernail, yet containing complex information structures, and began the painstaking work. Instead of simply transferring the data, he decided on a more complex task, carefully modifying the identification code, adding his biometric data as an additional authorized user. The work required extreme concentration. One wrong move could destroy the data forever. Meanwhile, Uncle continued his battle with poor quality repairs, his grumbling serving as a kind of backdrop for Alex's work. How did this lousy craftsman's hands not rip apart? He applied the thermal paste like he was plastering a wall. And that wire. Holy stars, it's connected to the wrong place. Is it really that hard to look at the diagram? After a week of painstaking work, when Alex's fingers had memorized every detail of the module, he was finally able to restore the identification system. The evening workshop greeted him with the familiar dim light and soft music. The crystals on the shelves shimmered as always, and the air was filled with the familiar sense of oil and metal. He installed the modified module back into the droid, checked all the connections twice, then 3 times, and paused, his hand on the activation button. His heart was beating so loudly it seemed to drown out even the jazz tune playing on the holo player. "Well, old man," he whispered, looking at the droid's tarnished body. "Let's see what you're hiding." He pressed a button. R4-K9 twitched, as if awakening from a long slumber, humming, quietly at first, then louder, and its dome began to slowly rotate. The sound of its systems mingled with the background music, creating a symphony of technological rebirth. The eye projector glowed a dim red, then switched to blue, casting the surrounding details in cool tones. "Systems activated," the droid said in a raspy voice that echoed years of silence. "Running diagnostics. Damage to the identification module detected. Repair complete. User identification." The droid scanned Alex with a thin beam of light that passed over his face like an invisible touch. "Welcome, Owner Alex. Basic functionality is now available."
It works!
Alex exclaimed, his voice echoing off the workshop walls, causing the crystals on the shelves to shimmer brighter. Uncle Garrick, who was watching the process, taking a break from his eternal struggle with poor quality repairs, shook his head in surprise.
It's unbelievable. I was sure he was hopeless.
R4, show me information about the previous owners, Alex asked, trying to contain his excitement. "Access to the archives is restricted," the droid replied in a voice reminiscent of distant travels. "High-level authorization required." Alex frowned. His modification only gave him basic access, as if he'd only received the key to the first room in a vast house of secrets. "What can you show?" "General information about systems, basic navigation data, technical documentation." "Show navigation data." R4-K9 activated his holoprojector, and the workshop air filled with twinkling stars. A star map appeared in the space between the shelves of parts, but it wasn't an ordinary one. It marked systems Alex hadn't seen in his school atlases.
The holographic stars mingled with the real-life reflections of the crystals on the shelves, creating the illusion of endless space right in the workshop. "This is a map of my travels," the droid explained, its mechanical voice taking on an almost nostalgic tone. "Basic version, without classified data." Even the basic version was astonishing. Red dots marked unknown systems, blue ones abandoned stations, green ones worlds with unusual characteristics. Each dot wasn't just a coordinate, but an entire story, full of dangers and discoveries. R4. Who was your last owner? Captain Jake Cord, explorer. Status: missing in action. Uncle Garrick stopped grumbling for a moment about yet another poor repair and listened to the conversation. "Can you tell us about him?" Captain Cord was an explorer of unknown regions.
We conducted numerous expeditions to distant systems. The last expedition ended unsuccessfully.
What's happened?
Sorry, this information is classified.
Alex understood the droid wouldn't give him any more information without full authorization. But what he'd already seen was quite interesting. Holographic stars continued to shimmer in the air, mingling with the crystal light and creating an atmosphere of cosmic mystery right among the earthly components and wires. R4, can you copy the available navigation data to this chip?
Of course, Master Alex.
Alex inserted the blank chip into the droid's port and waited for the copy to complete, watching the indicators on R4K9's casing flicker in time with the data transfer. The holographic map still hung in the air, its stars reflecting off the polished surfaces of the components on the workbench.
The data was incomplete, but even it was valuable. Coordinates of unknown systems, routes through little explored regions, notes of unusual phenomena. Meanwhile, Uncle Garrick returned to his work, and his disgruntled grumbling filled the workshop again. "Copying complete," R4K9 reported, interrupting his uncle's stream of curses. "Thank you." Alex carefully removed the chip and put it in his pocket. "Now go into standby mode." The droid disconnected, the holographic map disappeared, and the workshop returned to its usual appearance. Shelves of shimmering parts, a workbench with disassembled mechanisms, piles of old parts in the corner. Only a soft jazz melody reminded us that something unusual had happened here. Alex began putting away his tools, carefully placing each one in its proper place, a habit instilled in him by his uncle from the first days of work. His uncle watched him with curiosity, temporarily abandoning his fight against shoddy repairs.
What are you going to do with this data?
"I don't know yet," Alex answered honestly, wiping the scanner with a soft cloth. "But they might come in handy in the future."
Be careful. If this Captain Cord is truly missing, his information could be dangerous.
"I'll be careful." At home, Alex placed the precious chip on the table next to his textbooks and was about to study it, but his mother called him to dinner. Over dinner, his parents questioned him at length about the workshop. His father inquired about the technical details. His mother worried about safety. And then they had to do their galactic history homework. When Alex finally got free, it was already late, and he decided to postpone studying the data until the next day. But tomorrow the workshop was busy. 3 broken droids had been delivered at once, and the air was filled with the sounds of diagnostic scanners, the hum of welding machines, and, of course, the disgruntled grumbling of Uncle Garrick, who had discovered traces of the barbaric treatment of previous repairmen in each droid. Alex helped his uncle until late in the evening, when jazz music could no longer drown out his fatigue. He had work to do at home again, and he forgot about the chip. A few days later, Alex remembered the data, but school exams had just begun, and there was no time. The chip lay on the desk among his textbooks, then moved to a drawer, then to a box of old things, a journey familiar to many important but not urgent items. "I'll see later," Alex told himself, but later never came. A month passed. Alex continued to work in his uncle's workshop, honing his skills amid the shimmering crystals and humming machinery. The workshop's atmosphere had become familiar to him. The smell of machinery, the soft jazz music, his uncle's disgruntled grumbling over the work of the previous repairman, the clanking of parts and boxes on the shelves. R4-K9 stood in his corner, occasionally chiming in to help with technical questions, but otherwise revealing no secrets. The chip containing Captain Cord's data lay in a box of children's toys Alex no longer used. Occasionally, his gaze would stumble upon it, recalling the mysterious maps and holographic stars shimmering in the workshop's air, and thinking, I should take a look. But there were always more pressing matters. School, working in the workshop amidst whirring scanners and shimmering components, friends, family. The 10-year-old boy's life was full of events. Data about unknown worlds and ancient mysteries seemed distant, disconnected from the everyday reality of clanking instruments and his uncle's disgruntled grumbling.
I'll definitely study it someday, Alex promised himself, putting the chip deeper and deeper into the box.
In the evening, lying in bed, Alex sometimes thought about the day he first turned on R4-K9. Details floated through his mind. The shimmering crystals on the shelves, the annoying music. He was still humming to himself about the Leku. The holographic stars that appeared in the workshop's air, and his uncle's disgruntled grumbling over yet another shoddy repair. The droid knew something important. That much was obvious. But obtaining this information was proving more difficult than he thought. Maybe when I'm older, Alex mused. When I've learned more about technology, I'll be able to hack the droid's defenses. Or I'll find another way to get the full data. He opened his diary and wrote, I fixed up an old droid, R4-K9, in my uncle's workshop, amid all those shimmering parts and accompanied by his constant grumbling at the would-be repairman. The droid belonged to a researcher named Cord. I copied some navigation data. I saw a holographic map of unknown systems, but most of the information is classified. I need to find a way to gain full access to the archives. There might be something important there. Alex closed the journal and stashed it away. Tomorrow would be back to the workshop. New droids, new tasks, amidst the humming equipment and shimmering crystals. The chip with Captain Cord's data could wait. After all, he was only 10 years old. A whole life lay ahead, full of opportunities for discovery and exploration. The secrets of R4-K9 would remain hidden. They would await him among the workshop's other treasures, amid soft jazz music and the disgruntled grumbling of Uncle Garrick. But for now, he had more important things to do. Learning technology, refining his skills, preparing for the future. When the time came, he would definitely return to Captain Cord's mysteries. 10-year-old Alex Corrin fell asleep, unaware that an old toy box held the key to one of the galaxy's greatest mysteries. But the discovery lay waiting in the wings amid the shimmering crystals and humming mechanisms of the workshop. Chapter 9. Dungeon Exploration. The cold light of R4-K9's holoprojector flickered in the dim light of Uncle Garrick's workshop, casting bluish shadows on the walls covered with tools and spare parts. Somewhere in the corner, a fan hummed quietly, unsuccessfully trying to dispel the stuffiness. Alex bent over a 3D city map the droid had pulled from its dusty archives. A century-old map of Corellia, where every line glowed with a ghostly blue light. Look here, he whispered, pointing a trembling finger at the web of tunnels beneath the industrial district. His voice was muffled in the cramped workshop. These levels were supposed to be demolished during the infrastructure upgrade, but on modern maps they've simply disappeared, as if they never existed. R4-K9 emitted a soft, almost melancholy whistle, and the hologram obediently drew closer, the details becoming clearer. Alex saw entire blocks of underground spaces, old, high-vaulted workshops, endless warehouses, power nodes entangled in cables as thick as a human arm. All of this should have been right beneath his feet, sealed in concrete and time, forgotten like a bad dream. There must be access points, he muttered, studying the diagram of the ventilation shafts that snaked between levels like metal snakes. Here, the old duct system. They couldn't have sealed all the entrances. 3 days later, Alex stood before a rusty grate in a utility alley, where even during the day, perpetual darkness reigned between the high walls of the buildings. The air here was heavy, saturated with the smell of decay and industrial waste. He armed himself with homemade tools, a plasma cutter cobbled together from spare parts and a portable flashlight his uncle had thought lost. The metal yielded surprisingly easily. The bolts crumbled into rusty dust at the first touch, as if time had turned the steel to sand. The narrow shaft greeted him with a whiff of the past. The air smelled of stagnant moisture, dust, and something else, indefinably ancient. The metal walls were coated with condensation, dripping from the ceiling in a steady, hypnotic rhythm. Alex squeezed inside, feeling the cold metal scrape his back through his clothes, leaving long, painful marks. The flashlight beam trembled in his hand, picking out pipes and cable bundles from the pitch darkness, coated in a thick, velvety layer of dust that rose in clouds with every movement. The grate at the end of the shaft hung by a single hinge, swaying with a soft, creaking sound from the faint breeze. Alex carefully pushed the metal bars apart, and they gave way with a drawn-out groan, as if reluctantly revealing a path into a forgotten world. What he saw made him forget to breathe. A vast hall stretched before him, its ceiling lost in the darkness somewhere high above. The air here was different, colder, as if filled with the echoes of long-silenced voices and the ghosts of forgotten sounds. Rows of massive columns stretched into the distance, disappearing into the depths of the hall, supporting vaults covered in intricate technical patterns that seemed alive and pulsating in the lantern light. The walls were lined with some dark metal that absorbed the light, reflecting it only in dull, sickly reflections. Alex took a few cautious steps forward, and the sound of his footsteps echoed loudly in the void, bouncing off the walls and columns, creating the illusion of invisible companions. The floor was paved with slabs of an unknown material. Not metal, not stone, but something in between, feeling both hard and slightly springy underfoot. Shards of glass and metal shavings crunched between the slabs, producing a soft, almost musical ringing with each step. The air was thick with the sense of abandonment, the dust of centuries, rust slowly eating away at metal, and the faint scent of ozone, as if powerful energy installations had once operated here. Somewhere in the depths of the hall, a quiet drip could be heard. Water seeping through the ceiling, falling into invisible puddles with a measured, hypnotic rhythm. Between the columns stood rows of abandoned equipment, covered in a thick layer of dust that seemed silvery in the light of the lantern. Alex approached the nearest machine, a massive device with a multitude of manipulators and lenses that gleamed in the darkness like dead eyes. Even beneath the dust, it was clear that this was something completely different from modern machines. The lines were smoother, more organic, the materials more sophisticated, and the complexity of the design was astounding. This wasn't just technology, it was art, frozen in metal. "What were you doing?" he whispered, running his hand over the smooth surface of the control panel, his voice lost in the vastness of the room. Suddenly, somewhere deep within, a metallic clang erupted, sharp and unexpected in the deathly silence. Alex froze like a statue, turning off the flashlight with trembling fingers. In the absolute darkness, every sound seemed deafening. His own breathing, the pounding of his heart, the rustle of his clothes. Another clang, then a drawn-out scrape of metal on stone, the unpleasant vibrations making his teeth ache. His heart was pounding so loudly it seemed to be audible throughout the hall. Alex slowly turned on the flashlight, shielding it with his hand so that the light filtered through his fingers in weak beams, and looked around. A shadow flickered between the distant columns, something large and angular, moving with mechanical clumsiness. A feral droid. Alex had heard stories of machines that continued to operate in abandoned places, gradually going mad from isolation and lack of maintenance. Their programming degraded, their logic shorted out, and they became unpredictable and dangerous. From the darkness came a muttering sound, a distorted electronic voice uttering fragments of phrases. Procedure number 774. Initialization. Error. Error. Where are the operators? Shift over. No. not over. Work. Always work. The voice sometimes died down to a whisper, then rose to a mechanical scream, creating an eerie cacophony in the empty room. He began to slowly back away toward the exit, trying not to make any noise, calculating each step with mathematical precision. The shadow moved between the columns, accompanied by the creaking of damaged servos, the sound of metal rubbing against metal without lubrication, piercing and painful. Alex made out a silhouette, an old loading droid, one of its manipulators dragging along the floor, leaving a furrow in the dust and sparks from its contact with the stone slabs. Where is the cargo? Cargo number. Number. Memory error. Reboot. Failed. Who's here? Who violated? Security protocol. The muttering became increasingly fragmented, interspersed with static and mechanical sounds. Luckily, the machine didn't seem to notice him. Its sensors had likely failed long ago. Alex reached the ventilation shaft and disappeared into its protective darkness, but thoughts of the chamber he'd discovered haunted him. Even as he crawled back through the narrow tunnel, where every sound echoed off the walls, he thought about what he'd seen. The perfection of the abandoned machines, the secrets they held. The next day, he returned better prepared. His backpack contained a rope, extra flashlights with spare batteries, a basic lifeform scanner borrowed from his uncle's workshop, some food, and a thermos of hot tea, the only solace in the cold dungeon. Alex formulated a plan. Walk around the perimeter of the hall, keeping to the shadows near the walls, avoiding the central area where the damaged droid roamed, muttering madly. The second descent felt even more intense. The shaft seemed to be narrowing, the metal walls pressing on my shoulders, and the air growing increasingly stifling. Drops of condensation fell on the back of my neck, trickling down my collar in cold rivulets. The sound of my own breathing in the confined space seemed monstrously loud, and the thought of being cut off from the escape route forced me to speed up, risking getting stuck in particularly tight spots. Rows of smaller rooms, workshops, warehouses, laboratories, lined the walls of the hall, each holding its own secrets. The air within them was even more stale, permeated with the smells of chemicals, metal, and something organic that had long since decomposed, leaving only a faint, nauseating trace. Most of the rooms were empty, but some still held equipment, coated in dust that rose in clouds with every movement, making one cough and making one's eyes water. In one of the rooms, Alex found a whole collection of instruments of incredible finesse. Cutters capable of carving details the size of a grain of sand, their blades gleaming in the lantern light, unblunted by years. Measuring instruments with a precision that staggered the imagination. Micrometers capable of distinguishing fractions of an atom. Materials he couldn't even identify. Metals with iridescent shimmers, crystals emitting a faint internal glow, polymers that felt simultaneously hard and soft to the touch. The air in the workshop was especially heavy, filled with the ghosts of long-completed works. It seemed as if the walls remembered the touches of the masters, the sound of tools at work, the quiet conversations of those who once worked miracles of technology here. Dust lay unevenly on the work tables, and in some places, fingerprints were visible, as if someone had recently touched the surface. In one of the workshops, he discovered a palm-sized device covered in symbols that didn't resemble any alphabet he knew. The characters were carved with incredible precision, each line seeming alive, pulsating in the light of the lantern. When Alex picked it up, the surface glowed faintly with a bluish light, warm and pleasant, and a shimmering hologram appeared in the air. A diagram of some complex mechanism, its parts slowly rotating, revealing its inner workings. "It responds to touch," he muttered, turning the device in his hands. The hologram obediently rotated with him, showing the mechanism from different angles, each turn revealing new details, new levels of complexity. It was both unusual and unsettling.
Even the best modern holoprojectors required significant energy consumption and complex setup, but here, a small device that had lain abandoned for decades worked like new, as if time had no power over the technology of ancient masters. From the depths of the hall, the muttering of a feral droid could be heard periodically. Shift number 1200. Or, no. Error. Where is everyone? Why is it dark? Turn on the lights. Command not executed. System damaged. Repair.
Repair required.
The voice came closer and then moved away, accompanied by the grinding of metal and the hiss of damaged hydraulic systems. Alex chose a small room in the far corner of the hall for his hiding place. The space was relatively clean, the air felt less heavy, and a single entrance allowed him to control the approach. He brought several waterproof boxes, a camp table, and a battery-powered lamp, creating the semblance of a field laboratory. The walls of the room were covered with the same mysterious symbols as the device he'd found, as if they watched his work with dead eyes. Every few days, he descended into the dungeon, overcoming the claustrophobia of the narrow shaft, where the metal creaked under his weight and condensation dripped cold drops onto the back of his neck.
Gradually, he learned to move in the darkness, distinguishing sounds, the harmless drip of water against the ominous grinding of an approaching droid, the echo of his own footsteps against the sounds of others. He developed a map of the subterranean levels, far more detailed than R4K9's diagrams, marking safe routes and places best avoided. The air in different parts of the complex had its own character. In the old workshops, it was permeated with the smell of metal. In the laboratories, with chemical aromas, sweet and nauseating. The storage rooms smelled of dust and decay, and in the power nodes, ozone and something burning, stinging the nostrils and making the eyes water. One day, while examining a particularly intriguing device, some kind of material analyzer that responded to his touch with a soft hum, Alex heard voices from above. The sounds penetrated the thick concrete, muffled and distorted, but clear enough to recognize people above.
He froze, like a statue, listening to every sound. Heavy footsteps, the creaking of equipment, muffled commands. "Scanners are showing activity in Sector 7, came a male voice, distorted by static. "Could be smugglers, or some vagrants have found a way in." City security. Alex felt a cold sweat break out on his forehead. Quickly packing the most valuable finds into a waterproof bag, he turned off the lamp, and the room plunged into absolute darkness, which felt alive and oppressive. In complete darkness, he made his way to the emergency exit he'd discovered a week ago, an old drainage pipe leading to the river. The path to it lay through a particularly narrow corridor, where he had to crawl on all fours, and the walls were coated with a slime of unknown origin. The pipe proved a true ordeal. It was narrow, barely wider than his shoulders, and half submerged in icy water that seeped through cracks in the concrete. Alex crawled knee-deep through water so cold it took his breath away. The pipe walls were slippery with years of accumulated slime, the air stale and heavy, saturated with the smell of decay and chemical waste. Every meter was a struggle. His knees and elbows ached from contact with the rough concrete, and the thought that the pipe might narrow and he would be stuck here forever made his heart beat faster. Somewhere halfway down the path, the lantern began to flicker. The battery was dying. In the flickering light, the walls of the pipe seemed alive, pulsating, and the shadows danced, creating the illusion of movement. The sound of one's own breathing, amplified by the acoustics of the enclosed space, seemed monstrously loud. The water splashed with every movement, echoing off the walls and returning as a distorted whisper. When he finally emerged through the grating at the river dock, the sun was already setting, painting the sky blood red. Alex was soaking wet, frozen and exhausted, his clothes clinging to his body, his hair hanging in icicles. But his waterproof bag contained strange devices that could revolutionize his understanding of technology. The air above ground felt incredibly fresh and clean after the stale atmosphere of the dungeon. At home, he took a long, hot shower, trying to wash away not only the dirt and smells of the dungeon, but also the feeling of the walls pressing in on him. The hot water burned his skin, steam filled the bathroom, but even here, in the safety of his own home, he felt the ghostly presence of the ancient corridors and heard the echo of the droid's mad muttering. Where is everyone? Why so quiet? Work. Must work. That night, Alex lay in bed, examining the holographic diagram projected by the device he'd found.
Complex interweaving energy channels glowed softly blue in the dark room. Unknown materials were represented by symbols that seemed alive, and the operating principles defied modern theories. Every detail of the diagram was executed with incredible precision, every line possessing a meaning that eluded comprehension. Chapter 10. School Project. The city was suffocated by the merciless heat. The air above the scorching asphalt shimmered with mirages, turning distant buildings into ghostly apparitions. Thermometers showed 105 degrees Fahrenheit in the shade, but the real test was the humidity. Thick, suffocating, like an invisible hand squeezing the lungs. Even the air conditioners in the buildings were running at full capacity, and the city's power grid was cracking under the strain. Alex woke up with his sheets clinging to his body in a sticky film of sweat. Despite the air conditioning running all night, the room was stuffy. Outside, the air was literally melting, distorting the outlines of the buildings opposite. Smart people stayed indoors in such weather unless absolutely necessary, using public transportation or waiting for evening. But Alex wasn't smart in that regard, or, more accurately, his mind was preoccupied with other things entirely. He'd been up late last night, working on schematics found in ancient dungeons, and completely forgotten to charge his hover scooter. And taking public transportation to school meant wasting precious time in the morning, time he could have spent thinking about the project. So he decided to walk. It was only 20 minutes at a brisk pace. Within 5 minutes, Alex realized the extent of his mistake. The sun had become a merciless enemy, its rays piercing his clothes and skin like hot needles. The air was so thick with humidity that every breath was labored. It felt like he was trying to breathe hot soup. His shirt was stuck to his back, his hair was damp with sweat, and his vision was blurring with dehydration. The humidity was the worst part of this ordeal. In the dry heat, sweat at least evaporated, cooling the body. Here, it simply poured down in streams, bringing no relief. The air felt thick as jelly, and Alex felt his lungs working twice as hard, trying to extract oxygen from this suffocating mixture. By the time he reached school, the world around him was swaying slightly, and his temples were pounding. His clothes were completely soaked, as if he'd been caught in the rain, and his mouth was so dry his tongue was stuck to the roof of his mouth. And then, salvation. The automatic school doors slid open with a soft hiss, and Alex was enveloped in a wave of cool, air-conditioned air. It was like diving into a cold pool after hours in the blazing sun. He stopped right at the door, greedily inhaling the invigorating coolness, feeling the tension slowly leave his body. The school's climate control system was modern and powerful. The temperature was maintained at a comfortable 22 degrees, and the humidity was just right. The air circulated softly and silently, creating a feeling of lightness and freshness. Alex leaned against the wall, letting the cool air penetrate his wet clothes and touch his heated skin. "Alex!" a familiar voice called out to him. "You look like a drowned man!" He turned and saw Jack Marrow, a classmate with perpetually tousled red hair and a scattering of freckles across his nose. Next to him stood Lena Sykes, a girl with serious dark eyes and neatly braided hair. Both looked fresh and dry. Clearly, they'd arrived at school by public transportation. "I decided to go for a walk," Alex answered hoarsely, still catching his breath. "Bad idea." "Are you kidding?" Jack laughed. "In this heat, even stray cats hide in the shade, and you decided to make a forced march." Lena shook her head with the air of a wise old woman, although she was only 10 years old.
My father says that in this weather, every half hour outside without protection is equivalent to an hour of hard work. You could get heat stroke. Now I know, Alex admitted, feeling his breathing gradually return to normal. Next time I'll check the scooter's charge tonight. My uncle works for the weather service, Jack chimed in. He says this is just the beginning. The anticyclone will last another week, maybe 2. Temperatures could rise to 45. Great, Alex muttered. Then I'll have to sit at home, as if under siege. But school is nice, Lena remarked philosophically. Here you can forget that hell is going on outside. They walked slowly down the hallway toward the classroom. Alex finally felt like a human being. The cool air had done its job, the sweat had dried, and his breathing had returned to normal. The school hallways seemed like an oasis of civilization amidst a hostile world of melted asphalt and stifling heat. By the way, Jack said, are you ready for the power system project? I still can't figure out how to get my circuit to work reliably. More or less, Alex answered evasively. And you, Lena? I decided to make a model solar power station, the girl said. In this weather, it seems especially relevant. If the sun decides to roast us, at least let it do some good. Jack snorted. I'm getting some kind of nonsense. Half the indicators aren't lit, and the other half are blinking like Christmas lights. Miss Tella will definitely give me a C. Don't be upset, Alex encouraged him. The main thing is to show that you understand the principles. Technical execution will come with time. In fact, Alex was lying. His project was so perfect that it would have amazed even professional engineers, but he preferred not to talk about it.
They entered the classroom just as the bell rang. The room was spacious and bright, with large windows facing east. The blinds were now tightly closed, blocking out the scorching sun, but thin streaks of light still filtered through the cracks, creating a pattern of golden lines on the floor. Alex took his place by the window and, unable to resist, slightly opened the blinds. Outside, the world looked like the surface of an alien, hostile planet. The air shimmered with heat so intensely that everything seemed to melt and flow. The few passers-by moved from shadow to shadow, like gorillas in enemy territory. The leaves on the trees hung lifelessly, as if surrendering in an unequal struggle with the sun. The beam of light that filtered into the classroom was filled with dancing dust particles. Alex watched, mesmerized, as their chaotic movements unfolded. Brownian motion in action. The dust particles swirled in the airflow from the air conditioner, creating complex patterns.
Some rose, others sank, and still others spun in place.
It was like a miniature galaxy, where each dust particle was a star, following its own unpredictable trajectory. He blew lightly on the beam of light, and the dust particles danced wildly, their movement becoming even more chaotic and beautiful. This simple phenomenon had its own physics, its own mathematics, its own laws. Alex could spend hours observing such things, finding in them a reflection of the fundamental principles of the universe. His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps. Ms. Tella entered the classroom, and Alex hastily closed the blinds. Mariel Tella was a woman who immediately attracted attention with her unusual appearance. Tall, almost 6 feet tall, with an arrow-straight posture, she moved with the precision of a chronometer. Her gray hair was neatly pulled back into a sleek bun, secured with a geometric metal clip. Not an adornment, but rather a functional element. Her face was angular, with high cheekbones and a straight nose. But the most important thing was her eyes. Gray-blue, sharp as laser scanners. These eyes seemed to see everything, every detail, every imperfection, every attempt at deception or underperformance. Behind her thin-framed steel glasses hid a mind accustomed to precision and intolerant of approximations. Ms. Tella's attire was what might be called functional minimalism. A dark blue jacket made of a technical fabric resistant to stains and deformations. Straight-leg trousers of the same color, without a single unnecessary detail. A white blouse with a stand-up collar, buttoned all the way to the top. On her wrist, not jewelry, but a multifunctional chronometer capable of measuring time with microsecond accuracy. These were the clothes of a person for whom beauty lay in functionality and elegance in the absence of excess. Every element of her wardrobe was chosen for maximum practicality. Even her shoes, simple, low-heeled, with non-slip soles, were ideal for long hours in the laboratory. But for all her outward sternness, Ms. Tella was never cold with her students. When she spoke, her voice had a distinctive intonation, precise, measured, with a slight technical accent. She pronounced each word as if each one had been carefully calibrated for maximum clarity. "Good morning, class," she said, and even this simple greeting sounded like the beginning of a technical briefing. "I hope everyone got to school without overheating the cooling systems." She smiled, and the smile transformed her face, making it warm and almost maternal. In weather like this, it's especially important to remember to regulate your body's temperature. Several students giggled. Ms. Tella had a habit of speaking of the human body as a complex technical system, which at first seemed strange, but gradually became familiar and even amusing. "Before we move on to the next topic," she continued, activating the wall display, "let's check your understanding of the previous material. Jack, explain how a transformer works." Jack fidgeted. "Well, it transforms electricity?" "The specification is insufficient," Miss Tella said softly but firmly. "Lena, please complete the explanation algorithm." "A transformer changes the voltage of alternating current using electromagnetic induction," the girl answered clearly. "The primary winding creates a magnetic field, which induces a current in the secondary winding." "Correct. The transformation ratio is determined by the ratio of the number of turns of the windings." Miss Tella nodded approvingly. "See, Jack? Precise wording is critical to understanding the process." Alex watched the teacher with interest. Her way of communicating was unique. She used technical jargon even in casual conversations, but she did it with such naturalness and kindness that no one felt stupid or misunderstood. On the contrary, it was as if she were inviting the students into her world of precise formulations and clear definitions. "Alex," she turned to him, "what factors influence the efficiency of energy transmission?" "Conductor resistance, heating losses, inductive losses," he began, then paused. He could have gone on for another 10 minutes, talking about quantum effects and resonant frequencies, but he decided not to get too clever. "And, well, insulation quality." "The basic parameters have been defined correctly," Ms. Tella approved. "But the list can be expanded. Who can add additional factors?" Several hands went up in the air, and the discussion began. Alex listened with half an ear, looking again at the dust motes in the beam of light. Meanwhile, Ms. Tella approached the center of the classroom, where a holographic projector stood. It was a state-of-the-art device, a compact cylinder about half a meter tall, made of matte metal. There were no visible buttons or indicators on its surface, only thin lines that glowed a soft blue when the device was in operation. The projector responded to gestures and voice commands, but Ms. Tella preferred to use a small remote control, another manifestation of her love of precision and control. When she activated the device, the air above the projector began to shimmer, as if heating up, and then a three-dimensional image materialized within it. The hologram was so clear and detailed that it seemed like a real object. You could see the smallest details, zoom in on any element, and rotate the image at any angle. The colors were vibrant and natural, and when Ms. Tella showed the moving parts of the system, they moved smoothly and realistically. "So, class," Ms. Tella announced, activating the holoprojector, "your assignment for the next 2 weeks is to create a working model of the city's energy system." The hologram displayed a simplified diagram of Corellia's power distribution system: main generators, transmission stations, and distribution nodes. The image rotated slowly, showing the system from different angles. Individual elements were highlighted in different colors: generators in red, transmission lines in blue, and distribution nodes in green. Alex had been studying this system for months, and what the teacher showed him was child's play compared to the reality. The real Corellian power grid included thousands of components, backup systems, automatic transfer switches, and overload protection systems. But here, only a basic diagram, understandable to 10-year-olds, was shown. You can use standard training components from the lab, Ms. Tella continued, pointing to various elements of the hologram. The goal of the project is to demonstrate an understanding of the basic principles of energy transmission and distribution.
Evaluation criteria: system functionality, load distribution efficiency, and the quality of the results presentation. Alex had already seen his classmates mentally planning their projects. A few LEDs, basic circuits, maybe a couple of motors to simulate a load. Standard, predictable, boring. The best they could hope for was a system of 10 to 15 consumers with manual switching between power sources. And in his hiding place lay components that could create a model superior in efficiency to real urban systems. Ancient technologies, discovered in underground laboratories, operated on principles that modern science was only just beginning to understand. The rest of the lesson was spent discussing the technical details of the project. Ms. Tella patiently explained the basics of electrical engineering, using holograms to demonstrate complex concepts. Her teaching style was unique. She spoke to the children as if they were fellow engineers, yet always kept their age and level of expertise in mind.
Remember, she said at the end of the lesson, engineering is not about the complexity of a solution, but about its elegance. The best system is one that operates reliably with minimal resource expenditure. When the bell rang, Alex slowly gathered his things. The teacher's words echoed in his head. The elegance of the solution. The ancient technologies he studied were exactly like that. Incredibly effective, yet seemingly simple. As he left the classroom, he glanced at the window once more. The heat still raged beyond the blinds, turning the world into a scorching oven. But here, in the cool school hallway, surrounded by his classmates and the wise words of Miss Tella, he felt safe. At least until it was time to go home. That evening, in his room, Alex laid out the finds from the dungeons on the table.
3 energy crystals the size of a thumb, each capable of powering an entire house. Microchips made of an unknown material, capable of controlling energy flows with incredible precision. And most importantly, the regulator he found last week in one of the ancient laboratories. The device was the size of a fist and weighed next to nothing. When Alex connected it to a simple power source, the regulator began optimizing energy flows automatically, adapting to the load in real time. Commercially available systems required constant monitoring and tuning, but this device worked as if it were alive. I can just imagine the looks on everyone's faces, he muttered, starting to sketch out a diagram. The next days flew by in feverish work. Alex was creating not just a model, but a work of art. Energy crystals fed a network of 40 microscopic consumers, simulating various areas of the city. Ancient regulators automatically balanced the load, redirecting energy to where it was needed most. But the most impressive thing was its efficiency. The system operated at a power level that would normally power 5 or 6 devices at most, but the ancient components allowed it to power 8 times that number.
Ready for the presentation? Ms. Tella asked when Alex brought his project into the classroom. Yes, madam, he replied, placing the model on the demonstration table. The teacher turned on the recording device. All projects were being documented for evaluation. Alex activated the system, and the model came to life. 40 small indicators glowed steadily, indicating an even distribution of energy throughout the entire network. Mrs. Tella frowned as she checked the readings on the measuring instruments. Alex, this is unusual. Show me the power source. He pointed to the block containing the energy crystals. It looked like a standard educational-grade battery.
According to the readings, your system is consuming 8 times less energy than it should, the teacher said slowly.
How is that possible? Alex felt his stomach tighten. He hadn't imagined the effectiveness of ancient technology would be so noticeable. "I optimized the circuit," he muttered. "Used a more efficient layout." "Show me the diagram." Alex handed her the prepared diagram, a carefully simplified version that concealed the presence of ancient components. Ms. Tella studied it for several minutes, occasionally checking it against the actual model. "This circuit doesn't explain such efficiency," she said finally. "Alex, where did you get the components for this project?" From the standard set in the lab," he lied. "I want to talk to your parents." Alex's heart sank. He saw suspicion and growing concern in the teacher's eyes. Ms. Tella was smart enough to know that what she was seeing shouldn't be possible with the school's equipment. That evening, a tense conversation took place at the Corrin family home. His father listened to Alex's account of the project without interrupting, but his expression grew increasingly gloomy. "Show me this model," he said finally. Alex brought his father into his room and demonstrated the project. Chiron Corrin studied the device for a long time, occasionally checking the connections and measuring parameters with a portable scanner. "These components," he began, then stopped. "Alex, where did you get them?" "I found them in old warehouses," the son replied, deciding to stick to the half-truth. "I thought they were just higher quality versions of regular parts." His father looked at him for a long moment, and Alex realized that Chiron didn't believe a word he was saying. But instead of anger, his father's eyes held concern. "Tomorrow I'll go to school," he said, "and you'll create a new version of the project, the regular one." The next day, Alex sat in the school hallway while his father talked to Mrs. Tella in the teacher's lounge. The conversation lasted about 10 minutes, and when the door finally opened, the teacher's face expressed mild anxiety. "Alex," she said reservedly, "I think your project is too complex for the school curriculum. Why don't you create something more appropriate?" "Of course, Mistress Tella," he replied, not understanding what exactly his father had said, but understanding the result. Alex spent the next 3 days working on a new version of the design. Standard components, a predictable layout, textbook-level efficiency. When he presented the new model, Ms. Tella praised it as well done and asked no further questions. But the real conversation took place at home, when his father called Alex into his office. "Sit," Chiron said, gesturing to the chair opposite his desk. "We need to talk." Alex sat down, feeling like he was on trial. "I don't know where you got those ingredients, and perhaps it's better if I don't find out," Father began. "But I know they could cause trouble." Alex opened his mouth to object, but his father raised his hand. "Don't say anything, just listen. There are powers in the galaxy that are very interested in ancient technology. Corporations, governments, criminal organizations. If they find out a 10-year-old boy has access to such things..." He didn't finish the sentence, but Alex understood. The danger was real. "Your teacher is a good woman, but she could have told someone else. She could have filed a report with the education department. And from there, the information could have reached people you'd rather not meet." "What did you tell her?" Alex asked quietly. "That you took components from my workshop without asking permission. That they were experimental parts I received for testing, and that it won't happen again." Father leaned forward, looking Alex straight in the eyes. "Son, I don't know what you found or where, but you must understand, such things attract attention, and attention can be dangerous. If you want to continue your research, you must learn to remain invisible." "How?" "Be a good student, but not a standout. Get high grades, but not the highest. Answer questions, but not all of them. And never, do you hear me? Never demonstrate technology that's beyond the current state of the art." "I understand, Dad." "Good. Now show me where you hide your finds. We need to make sure they're safe." That night, Alex lay in bed, reflecting on what had happened. He learned an important lesson. Knowledge is power, but power without caution is danger. If he wanted to unlock the galaxy's secrets,
he must learn to conceal his abilities.